Because personally, I'm going to have to ask myself, the question and challenge myself: how do I merge this area of science and the history of science and the politics of science? How does one merge it and merge it into liberation work, that one is doing now? How do we make it popular? How do we make it mass oriented? How do we get this knowledge to the vast majority of our people, especially our young people who are so enthused? Those are our warriors, those are our soldiers, but they need to be armed with information, strengthened with knowledge, because knowledge and information is indeed a weapon. So that, as they're forging on the nation state, that we're conscious of this knowledge, of doing Sankofa, of going back into the future in order to bring it, to bear on our present, and our future. That, it seems to me, is one of the key challenges. But the other powerful challenge, which needs to manifest, is this question of a federation of African states. I mean, one of the reservations that one has is that the states as we have them today, on the continent especially, are essentially neo-colonial states. And so a federation of neo-colonial states would be one horrible disaster if, they're run by neo-colonialists. But then a federation of people to people, and it was something that was discussed, one of the issues we're discussing yesterday, with some of the comrades and colleagues, that we're around a table with. This question of people to people solidarity, so that the issue of African federations, of us, going into a union, it's not just a government thing. It's not state to state, but it's people to people. And so one of the things that, we must push, all of us, is this fundamental question of the global nature of our African identities. That we stop, to see ourselves as Nigerians and Gabonese and, Ghanaians and Congolese and all these other nonsensical identities that we have. But not just that we talk about them like we're talking now, but that it's actually, embedded in our spirits, in our psyche, and in our approach to our work. Because those of you, who are on the continent know that we face, this crisis of religion, this crisis of ethnicism that is tearing us apart. And the only solution to that is going to, to start to address things and see things as a global body. And that when we speak of a federation of African states, we're not just referring to us on the continent, but that we are coming to the table with all of our power. And our power means the millions of Africans in the diaspora. That there's that clarity of understanding. So it's not something we just talk about or we preach about, but that we actually begin to implement in whatever, ways, we're working, whatever little areas of work, that we engage in. So I'll leave you at this time. And I know there's going to be a question and answer session, and I look forward to that. But like, Marcus Garvey's words, I always, quote them. They're internal. And, Sheikh Antedop would agree totally with that. Rise up, you mighty race, for you can accomplish whatever it is that you will. Kwame Nkrumah's words are also relevant. Says organization determines everything. And Sheikh Antedop was very clear about that organization determines everything. And of course, Fanon, standard Fanon. Every generation out of relative obscurity must identify its mission and either fulfill it or betray it. Sisters and brothers, have we identified the mission of our generation? Will we fulfill it or will we betray it? This is the question we need to answer ourselves. Thank you very much.
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you want to write essays that inspire,
I think what we are suffering from is ideological confusion at the moment. That is that we're not clear, we're not thinking clearly, and that we need a context within which to answer the question, is something good or bad? We assume that we have the same goals, but we never say what they are. It's time for us to think and articulate and establish our goals as Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We need vision, we need clarity. Otherwise, we can't answer the question, is it good for African people? Once we agree, then we can have a frame of reference and some ideological grounding. Well, let me just give some definitions or give my view of this. Nationalist goal is self-determination in the spirit of Delaney, Garvey, Malcolm, Amos. It is Pan-African commitment, that is the unity of African people worldwide and one Africa on the continent as a basis for African strength. So we are about building a Pan-African world order based on the principles of Ma'at, not in imitation of a European order. Ma'at as justice and truth. We need a nation concept, as Dr. Clark told us. A Black economic program, a cultural program, an independent political organization, independent Black media, independent African-centered education financed by us and controlled by us. All of this presupposes, very importantly, an African Black identity. Now, if we're not just paying lip service to what I've just said, if we really mean this, then there are some implications for this recent election. I want to touch on just a couple. One, the question of identity. Without clarity on this issue, there is no nationalist movement. There is no Pan-African movement. There's no reason for us to be here as a community. Without racial, cultural identity, which works for us as a people and gives us power, then there is no reason for us to be here. That's the basis for our struggle. But what confusion about identity does is it works for integrationists. It works for assimilationists. It works for Marxists.
What characteristics in the African personality and in the minds of African children, which if they existed there would be perceived as threats to European domination? And you will see those characteristics being what? Neutralized and washed out. And from that, when you start with that question, you can begin to see the system organized economically, politically, educationally, and in every way to create those characteristics or to neutralize those other characteristics which work against European interests. If the love of African people, one from the other, if we can look beyond these names that white people have put up on us and see ourselves as one African people is a threat to European dominance, then you will see us identifying ourselves in terms of these European given names. I'm West Indian, I'm Bahamian, I'm Afro-American, I'm this, and using those as what? As the basis and foundation for not coming together and organizing as a people, you see? In fact, you heard, I believe, on LIB the other day, I think the United States is now getting ready to put in a new racial category in the census called mixed. That's going to give a lot of Negroes a way out. Yeah. So they're going to bring into being a mixed race. So in the future, you can check off mixed. You know, check your little color out and do the mix number. A South Africanization, this is the thing I've had to tell people for years and years, that race is not only a biological term, a genetic term, it is also a sociological term. And to a great extent, it is more important sociologically than it is biologically. People can define you in or out of the race at any time they feel like it. And one of the powers that we've given and permitted the European to have, you see, is that power to define ethnicity in the way that suits his will and his wishes. So now, in order to water down and knock down African unity and sense of peopleness, we will now create a new ethnic group, and that is the one called mixed. Knowing that some of you seeking to escape your blackness and escape your African heritage and so forth will eagerly move toward that group, and you'll get a little differential crumb for identifying yourself that way, and therefore the burgeoning and developing power of African people can be broken, and our subordination can continue. This is the kind of game that is going on when you let another people define who and what you're about. It also lets you know then that the identification of black people the world over as African people is a major threat to European dominance. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to do what? Redefine you ethnically. They are motivated then to redefine the ethnic group, because redefinition of it means the minoritizing of the ethnic group, and therefore the more you fracture and minoritize a group, the weaker that group is, and that group then cannot overthrow you. When you are a minority, you gain power by minoritizing everybody else. And this is the game. And therefore, if identifying ourselves as Africans, regardless of nationality, is a threat to Europeans, you're going to find your children reject being called what? African.
Microphone check 1 2. Greetings, family. Greetings and welcome. Greetings and welcome to this extraordinary and special session entitled African Power, the Political Purpose of African Identity. My name is Shakara, and I am the host of this particular channel right here. And today I have some phenomenal guests from our world Pan-African community. One that goes, you're familiar with, you've seen him a couple of times on this channel, Kings and Queens, Brother Omawale Afrika, and somebody who's new, somebody who's new to Shakara Speaks, you know what I'm saying, Sister Jam Iwuyor. And so I'm going to get them to just kind of do a little brief introduction to themselves, because Sister Jam is like new to the thing, you know what I'm saying. I'm going to start with her and just let her introduce herself to you, family. Let you know, who she is and all of the fantastic and beautiful work that she's doing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, brother, for having me on today. My name is Jessica Ann Mitchell Iwuyor. I'm a writer, a pan-Africanist, and communication specialist. I do communications for the Pan-African Congress North American Delegation, and I'm the founder of the National Black Cultural Information Trust.
Beautiful. Give thanks. I'll let Brother Omwale introduce himself for those who are not aware of who he is. For some reason, we can't hear you, bro. You're unmuted and all of that, but you might need to mic up.
No?
Yeah, we can hear you now, bro.
All right, cool. So, peace, family. My name is Brother Omawale. I am a grassroots organizer out of the Philadelphia area. Also a writer. Currently serve as the Vice Chinuti for Afrocentricity International, which is an organization that was founded by Dr. Malefe Kete-Asante and Dr. Amma Mazama in 2011. It's headquartered in Philadelphia. Was one of the co-organizers for the RBG Centennial Conference, along with my sister, Jam Iwuyor, and just all around, just looking forward to this conversation tonight.
Yes, indeed, family. So I'm just saying to you, that the panel is powerful today, and if you don't know that, you're going to get to know that in a second. I want to bring you greetings also from my brother Abiola Soul, my brother Abiola, who you've seen on this channel before as well. He was trying to make it with us today, but he is currently in the Congo, yeah, doing some fantastic work over there in Central Africa. And so, you know what I'm saying, we gave him leave, kings and queens. We, you know, do your work on the motherland, bro, and we'll catch up with you another time. But I look forward to hearing from him soon, and in terms of the work that he's doing over there. But yeah, he was just unavailable to make it. But that would have been a good addition, because our brother is from Cote d'Ivoire, and oftentimes the English speaking and the French speaking African communities don't always link. So we've got diaspora representation here, but we're missing our motherland representation. But don't worry, that will come at some point in the not too distant future. Just to say that the video that you were watching as you came in, for those who were here, first of all, you would have seen one of my aunties, Auntie Affiong, yeah, who is a Pan-African organizer, born and raised in Nigeria, but well known in the Pan-African world community, organizing primarily in here, Ghana and Nigeria, but known to many brothers and sisters in the United States also. She was speaking, I believe, in Munich, yeah, at a Pan-African conference there about the importance of global African identity. That was in 2015. During the hype and the furor over the election of the first Black president, Barack Obama, Mama Marimba Ani was one of the few who stepped forward with a right and correct analysis. And so that was her speaking at a debate in Harlem in 2008, I think it was, or early 2009, entitled, "Is the election of Barack Obama good for Black people?" And following that, you would have heard Baba Amos Wilson, and I'm forgetting the actual name of that particular lecture, but he was speaking about the idea of African identity being a threat, yeah, to European world dominance, okay? And so those introductory videos were really setting the context for today's conversation. Every now and then, we just need to kind of reassess and redefine things for each generation, because it seems at this moment in time, yeah, that there are a lot of political ideologies that claim to be pro-Black, yeah, that seem to have found a justification for waging an attack on African identity, the concept of African identity, the validity of African identity, and even just the idea of Africanness in general, yeah? And so it's necessary for us, as those who come from ideologies, yeah, who affirm an African identity, to clarify the thing every now and then, yeah. And so that's what today is about, and I hope ones and ones take something from it. We're going to get into a conversation, and we're going to also open up for you to join us if you have any additions, questions to ask, comments to make, and them kind of things there. Now, how it's going to run is, I'm going to drop a presentation, yeah, for like maybe 30 minutes, yeah. I'm not going to make it anything over that, right? And I'm not going to lie to you, like, I was struggling, yeah, with what to take out, yeah, because there's enough, yeah, right? but I do want to hear, and want you to hear from my guests as well, yeah. So yeah, I'm going to speak for like 30 minutes. And because it's 30 minutes, it's going to be like a really condensed version of something that would be normally much longer, yeah. I'm going to take out like all of the levels of that I would normally go into in terms of defining terms and concepts, and just kind of kick some ideas, and then we're going to have a conversation with brother Omowale and sister Jam, yeah. So yeah, man, like I can't overstate, yeah, how blessed I am to have my two guests with me today, do you know what I'm saying, to deal with this particular subject, because these are some very, very sharp Pan-African minds. And so, you know what I mean, I just look forward to, you know, having that conversation with them once I've concluded. So I'm going to share my screen now. 1 second, at the wrong thing, may I share all on. All right. Okay. Make sure I get the right thing. Hold on. Yes, Kings and Queens. So I hope you get something from this. Please note down your questions and anything that you may have. And share the link, yeah? House cleaning. Share the link far and wide. And also like the video as you come through, and make sure you raise the vibration of this Pan-African energy in the land of YouTube. Okay, we're going to go in. Share entire window. Right. Okay. So this is just something that I put together to open up and lay the foundation for this conversation. All right. Now, I'm not sure why. All right. There we go. So we're going to start that again because we're having some problems here. Here we go. Okay. All right. So as you can see, African power, the political purpose of African identity in the 21st century. Yeah. Normally I define African and define power and define politics and identity, nationality, and all them thing there. We don't have time for that today. By the way, let me just make sure. Can everybody see? Can you all can see the screen, right? The presentation.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay,
it.
cool. Just making sure. All right. But we're not going to do that today. Yeah. Another day I'll go into all of that. Suffice to say that most people should be able to get a basic understanding of what each of these terms mean. Yeah. However, what I do want to define is this idea of deconstruction. All right. And it means a method of critical analysis of philosophical and literary language, which emphasizes the internal workings of language and conceptual systems, the relation quality of meaning, and the assumption implicit in forms of expression. Why I have chosen to begin with this idea of deconstruction, and then we're going to get into reconstruction, is the fact that we have identities, yeah, that we operate under at this present moment in time. Yeah. And so people, when you affirm an African identity, there are a number of assumptions that people generally have. There is a dominant narrative around what that means and how such an identity functions in today's world. And so there are those, for example, who would say that you cannot have an African identity because Africa is a continent full of 50-something countries. And there are thousands of ethnicities. And there are thousands of languages. And so even if, this is true, and I'm affirming that this is not necessarily the case, but even if it was the case, why is that something that we accept without an analysis, without an in-depth process of investigating why that is the case and whether indeed this reality as it stands is conducive to our development, as a people? And even before that, is this an organic reality? Is this reality one that Africans have defined for ourselves based upon our own ideas of who we are? Or is this a reality that has been imposed upon us, or a reality that we have adopted or assimilated in response or in reaction to a reality that has been imposed upon us? So I think it's necessary in looking at our identity as a people to engage in the process of deconstruction. What is behind this identity or these realities that are associated with this identity? What undergirds it? How did it come about? Yeah. And it seems to me that there is a significant number of us who are willing, for whatever reason, to accept these narratives without further investigation because it seems to suit whatever political ideology we want to defend at any moment in time. But today we're going to engage in that, at least on a cursory level. And so we're going to start by looking at the research of Baba Kwesi Pra, in a book called Anthropological Prisms, Studies on African Realities, looking at the extent to which these identities are organic. He says European expansion, i.e. into Africa, not only radically altered the historical mold of non-European societies, but also reconstructed and re-narrated the historical accounts of their societies before the European encounter. Today, the real problem is that too many of us, even in the non-Western world, have adopted the blinkered Western perspectives in our appreciation and understanding of our realities. We look at ourselves through European eyes. Sadly, he goes on to say later on in this particular essay, sadly and significantly, we opened the post-colonial era, with the same albatross of Eurocentric historical periodization. Independent African countries and obliging historians quickly invented new histories for their countries. The history of Zambia, the history of Ghana, the history of Ivory Coast, the history of Namibia, etc., appeared for countries which had a few years earlier not existed. And even those cases where they had previously existed during the colonial period, often under different names, they had not existed as identifiable and separate countries before the end of the 19th century. The implications of these historical inventions and the new identities they spawned have had serious implications for Africans since the end of the colonial period. To explain this a little piece, yeah, many of us will be familiar with the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where the majority of the borders that we currently understand make up the nation states, yeah, of Africa at the moment, were drawn. All right, around this table there were no Africans. Yes, there were no Africans. We're talking about French, Britain. France, Britain, Portugal, Belgium, Germany, Italy, and there were a couple other European nations apparently who had observer status. Yeah, and there's some speculation about the extent to which America was at the table as well with their observer status, but we won't go too much into that right about now. But this conference created nation states where they previously did not exist, and these nation state creations did not respect the indigenous makeup of our people, our societies, our nations at that time. And so post-colonially, when we were fighting for liberation, what happened was we maintained these colonial constructs that were created for the purpose of facilitating European colonization, and for no other reason. And in fact, it was even worse than that, because in reality, especially where there was a regional confluence, yeah, of these nation states as governed or owned by a European nation. For example, you had the area of French West Africa, which they governed as basically a single expanse, yeah, as one nation, but split it up in terms of how they organize the Africans around those nations, yeah. The same with Britain and so on and so forth. So we now, operating in those truncated nation states, continue to serve the interest of the people that had created those nation states in the first place. The colonizer cut up the land, invented or created or installed infrastructure to facilitate the extraction of resources from the land. And it just so happens that today, that same scenario is playing itself out, even though our nations are claimed to be independent. And for those of us from the Caribbean, the same reality is presenting itself. And just because you needed an image of a radiant African woman smiling in your life, we've used this particular image. But more importantly, this extract is taken from a essay by a sister by the name of Foluke Adebisi, who is a lecturer at Bristol University. I had the pleasure of meeting the sister in 2018, where we were both speaking at a Pan-African conference at Birmingham City University, and she delivered a paper called Pan-Africanism and Decolonization. So Shakara, but you're talking about nation states, but in reality, the authentic identity for African people on the continent is tribal. Yeah, Africans identify by their tribes. All right, well, let's see what this sister from Nigeria has to say about tribes in terms of deconstructing this idea in our mind. She says, and by the way, the actual subheading in this section is entitled "The Inadequacies of Tribe." She said, it may be presumed that the best way in which to speak of Africa with an anti-colonial script would be through the medium of the tribe. However, the word and concept of tribe carries with it so much of the colonial narrative that it is an unreliable narrator of reality. Tribe is an inexact descriptor. It does not correlate to size or composition or internal homogeneity. It obfuscates reality and history, mythologizing, fetishizing, and reducing African pre-colonial polities, and carries with it the pejoratives of outdated social theory, including primitiveness, savagery. Tribe arises directly out of the racial characterizations which serve as justifications for colonization. Well, that sounds all well and good. That sounds, you know what I'm saying, but can we substantiate this any further? Most African languages have no similar word for tribe. Words used by Africans to self-identify are more similar to people or nation, and you have a reference there if you want to go and do more research. The colonial creation of tribe basically replicates the colonial creation of state. So what she's saying here is that this idea of tribe is not dissimilar from the idea of the nation states that were created in the minds and suiting the purpose of the colonizer, in that it traps the fluid humanity. It traps fluid humanity into cultural and nationalistic borders that they did not choose. It prevents agency, change, and development. It is the starting point of epistemic violence. The creation of the tribe is a sub-step in the creation of the state, and thus the decolonization of tribe should be part of the decolonization of knowledge of Africa. You know, at this moment, I'm reminded of a saying that I've come across. Yeah, I was listening to a scholar who was doing some work on Islam and the Timbuktu manuscripts, and he quoted, I believe, a Wolof proverb that said something to the degree that a family name has no home. Yeah, which means that basically, or has no, I can't remember. Yeah, was it home or something like that? Anyway, but basically, you're gonna find different family names because people are moving between different groups of people and different distinctions. Yeah, in terms of developing families, right? And clans. Yeah, that was the general point that was being made there. Can we substantiate this even further? Yes, we can. We return to Baba Kwesi Pra in Anthropological Prism Studies on African Reality, where he says, in much the same way that colonialism created chiefs where they did not exist, anthropologists raised sub-nationalities. These are European anthropologists now, understanding that anthropology is inherently a racist discipline of study. Yeah, and sub-ethnicities to conceptual status of tribes. Example, the Dinka in Sudan were conceptually split into Atwat, Gogriel, Boer, etc. The Mandi Moru group was split into Mandi, Lugbara, Olubo, Avukaya, Kaliko in Sudan, Logo, Madi, Lugbara in Uganda, and Logo, Avukaya, Kaliko, Lugbara in Congo Zaire. The theoretical and scientific limitations and distortions of this approach has been partially scrutinized by Marquette, who suggested that, quote, the study of large units in Africa would be no mean contribution to anthropological theory. We don't even discuss African social development, African nation state development in the context of large units. We completely dismiss the fact that there was a Kemet, a Tarseti, a Bakongo, a Ghana, Wagadu, Mali, Songhai, Monomotapa. They completely dismiss that and the context in which those social formations, those nation formations would have come about, because we want to emphasize this concept of tribe, which is inherently colonial, and we don't, again, study large units in Africa. We don't do it for some reason. Why? Why not? Even those of us in the Pan-African, African-centered, conscious scholarship community seem to have missed this. This point cannot be underemphasized. One of the most important challenges facing anthropology in Africa today is to identify optimal cultural units on the basis of which development efforts can be constructed. We've already emphasized the fact that currently the nation states that we currently operate within are not conducive to optimal cultural units on the basis of which development efforts can be constructed. Under colonialism, anthropology became a science of tribes in culture contact and the process of acculturation. Administrative principles, which are methodologically constructed along the lines of proliferated divisions, facilitated the process of rule, divide and conquer. Segmentary lineages became instruments of colonial administrative policy. So in order, how they, what he's explaining here is the extent to which they used clanship systems and created divisions among peoples for the sake of facilitating the colonial order. An example of this is, for example, the elevation of different clans among the Igbo, to chieftaincies, where they didn't have that kind of a centralized system prior to. When I was in Ghana in 2015, I was my brother who lives in Ghana who is Ga. Was explaining to me, because we was going around Accra, and Accra was a city that was founded by the Ga. And he was explaining to me that back in the day, the Ga never had royalty. The community was governed by the Wulome, which is their priesthood system. Okay, it was only when the Europeans came, the Europeans were looking for a king, right? And so kings were invented, for the sake of facilitating communication with the European, the Dutch and the British in particular. All right. Let me go forward some more. So now we get to Reconstruction, and I'm going to move very quickly through this, and then we're going to get into our conversation. So I'm hoping that gives you some pointers in terms of the extent to which what we consider to be the authentic African reality is a fallacy and is in fact a colonial construct. I could go into this idea of the thousands of languages, and then maybe if we have time in the conversation, we'll come back to that. But for now, Reconstruction, the action or process of building or forming something again after it has been damaged or destroyed. Understanding that our organic capacity to define, self-define, and look upon ourselves through our own eyes has been destroyed. Therefore, we need to reconstruct that capacity. The second principle of Kwanzaa is kujichagulia, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined, named, created for, and spoken for by others. So let's begin. And we, like Shakara, like if you see me for any significant period of time, it's hardly a presentation that goes by where we don't quote Mama Marumba Ani or Baba Amos Wilson. So we're going to get into that a little bit today, kings and queens. Those of us, she says, in the introduction to a beautiful book called Self-Healing Power and Therapy that is written by Baba Kim Bwadende Kiabunseki Fukiao. She says, those of us who have been committed to Pan-African liberation and self-determination have been studying, researching, learning, and teaching about the genius of ancient African civilizations for many years. This has been the ritual process of constructing a paradigm for African-centered reconceptualization. Our approach is continually challenged by those who claim that there is no African worldview, that each African society is fundamentally different, and that the concrete substance of African culture has been destroyed and is now lost within such abstractions as worldview. According to this ideological position, the African connection is non-existent, nothing but a figment of the African nationalist imagination. This is what people are telling us nowadays, kings and queens. All right. But she says in her great book, Let the Circle Be Unbroken, our oppressors have emphasized the loss of language, dress, living patterns, and other tangible and surface aspects of culture, just as they do in discussions of African culture on the continent. They emphasize differences in language and customs, even physique, from one society to another. They do this with good reason. It is an emphasis that serves their objective. Until we learn that it serves our objectives to emphasize the similarities, the ties, the unifying principles, the common threads and themes that bind and identify us all as African, we will continue to be politically and ideologically confused. In essence, the same process that went on the continent of Africa has gone on in the diaspora. The deliberate attempt to sever us and divide us and divorce us from an understanding of ourselves and our culture and our links to each other. All right. But let's delve into this a little bit further. In this great and illustrious book, Civilizational Barbarism by Baba Sheikh Anta Diop, he has a chapter where he's addressing the subject of culture, and he defines culture within three primary domains: the historical, the linguistic, and the psychic. The historical, the linguistic, and the psychic. And we're going to hear a little bit from him in terms of the historical dimension of culture right about now. He says, we have said earlier that a people without a historical consciousness is a population. There is a difference between a nation and a population. And that difference is based upon whether that people have a historical conscience or not. The loss of national sovereignty and of historical conscience following a prolonged foreign occupation engenders stagnation and even sometimes regression, disintegration, and the partial return to barbarism. Is that not what we are experiencing right about now? Or have experienced in our history? Regression, stagnation. But then, what would we call an African history? We need to distinguish two levels. The immediate one of the local histories, so dear and deeply lived, in which the African peoples, segmented by diverse exterior forces, the principle of which is colonization, again referring to tribe and nation states, are shriveled up, find themselves trapped and vegetating today. So we deeply live these realities of being Jamaican, of being St. Lucian, Trinidadian, of being Ivorian, South African, Congolese, as opposed to Mukongo. Yeah, we deeply live them. We deeply live these realities of being Nigerian, and whatever else. But within these configurations, we are shriveled up, trapped, and are vegetating right now and today. But we have to understand that this is the reality that we live in at the moment. We must not deny this reality. We must understand it for what it is, deconstruct it, and reconstruct based upon the findings of our deconstruction. So he goes on to say, a second level, more general, further off in time and space, and including the totality of our people, comprises the general history of Black Africa insofar as research permits, restoring it today from a purely scientific approach. Each history is thus pinpointed and correctly situated in relation to the general historical coordinates. Thus, all the continent's history is re-evaluated according to a new unitary standard suited to revive and to cement on the basis of established facts all of the inner elements of the ancient and historical mosaic. Stick a pin. There are those who say that by affirming African identity, you are disrespecting the uniqueness and individuality of varying different African groups. That this Pan-African ideal of the oneness of Africa does not pay due attention and regard to the beautiful multiplicity of variety among African peoples. I want to know where people who promote this idea in relation to Pan-African ideology have got this from. I want to know, because I have been a Pan-Africanist all my life and I am yet to find it in any significant measure. Baba Sheikh Anthony Diop says here, insofar as research permits, yes, restoring today from a purely scientific approach, each history is thus pinpointed, which means that each one is respected and pinpointed and correctly situated in relation to the collective whole. That is the dominant Pan-African sensibility, not a negation of difference and variety and all that beautiful stuff. No, yeah. So tell the true story, all right, and stop misrepresenting the thing. But Baba Sheikh Anthony Diop has done more work than most, yeah, in terms of actually detailing and putting together this grand epic history, as he calls it, and he's got it through many different books, but two of the most viable on that subject are The Cultural Unity of Black Africa, The Domains of Matriarchy and Patriarchy in Classical Antiquity, and also Black Africa, The Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federated State. What is the political purpose of African identity? Ultimately, the formation of a federated state. In words, we might use different language depending on our specific political proclivities. Yeah, understanding that there is also variation among Black nationalist Pan-Africanist ideology. Okay, to move forward, and I'm not going to go into all the examples or the rationale and how he seeks to connect African history through making the Nile Valley our classical civilizations and so on and so forth. Yeah, just in brief, he says a consideration of the pre-colonial African family, that of the state, the accompanying philosophical and moral concepts, bearing in mind that we tend to reduce African culture to food, music, dance, clothes, maybe language, language, but we tend not to look at the ontology, yes, the cosmology, the axiology, wherein which we might find the greater foundation for the idea of cultural unity of Black Africa. Yeah, so again, the accompanying philosophical and moral concepts and the like reveals a consistent cultural unity resulting from similar adaptations to the same material and physical conditions of life. I'm going to leave that there and move on very quickly and get into now the current moment. Yeah, what did our more recent ancestors and activists and elders say, and what were they trying to achieve through this affirmation of an African identity? Do you know what? I feel like, no, I'm just going to read very quickly. I was going to skip it, but I'm just going to read very quickly and get to some examples. Yeah. We emphasize the reclamation of the African identity by African peoples and their construction of an African-centered consciousness because we recognize that it was and is the repression of these two factors that made the mental conquest and continuing domination of African peoples possible. This repression out of consciousness of their original identity and the consciousness, I missed my place. This repression this repression out of consciousness of their original identity and consciousness is essentially what is referred to as alienation or self-alienation. When the repression of African identity and consciousness, the refusal to learn of African history and culture are motivated by shame, guilt, anxiety, fear, embarrassment of being identified as an African, most often induced by the political, economic machinations of the dominant whites. When the African person uses these attitudes and feelings to reject his African identity and heritage, the identity and heritage being an objective fact, whether he accepts it or not, then we refer to that person as self-hating or self-alienating. The general attitude is one of self-hatred. In being ignorant of, self-alienating, or rejecting his objective historical cultural identity, self-hatred, the person is compelled to assume a new identity, albeit a false one, or suffer identity confusion, ambivalence, or lack of self-definition, usually characterized by a chronic search for purpose and meaning. But what I want to focus on here is this part where he says, most often induced by the political economic machinations of the dominant whites. Yeah. And then it linked that to this idea that we are forced to take on a new identity. So we live in a society that rewards us for assimilating the identity of the colonizer and rejecting the identity of African. And so we find a justification within that context because the colonizer has created a society for that purpose, to fulfill that purpose. But some of us think that we're liberating ourselves and we're thinking intelligently by propagating the idea that we should do this in the first place right now because it is most politically expedient to be British rather than African, or British primarily and African supplementarily. How? In what sense? Even non-Africans understand the thing. This is taken from a book by the name of Tribes, How Race, Religion, and Identity Determine Success in the New Global Economy. What is the political purpose of an African identity? This European called Joel Kotkin, who happens to be a Jew, is identifying in this book the global power dynamics and the nations or the systems of nationhood, the ideals of nationhood that are either have assumed power or are ascending in the power dynamic, and what are the features, the characteristics, yes, through which they are achieving this global power. Yeah, and he identified three major components. One, strong identity. That's the first thing. Yes, a sense of mutual dependence that helps the group to adjust to the changes in global economic and political order without losing its essential unity. Two, global network. Having a global network is an essential component to political and economic power in today's world, at least according to this assessment, based on mutual trust that allows a tribe to function collectively beyond the confines of national or regional borders. But yet we want to just be black people in Jamaica, black people in Britain, black people in Nigeria, black people in South Africa, unconnected, and we expect in a globalized world economy that runs transnationally to assume power in that reality. And we think we're thinking intelligently. And three, technical knowledge, a passion for technical knowledge and other knowledge from all possible sources, combined with an essential open-mindedness that fosters rapid cultural and scientific development, critical for success in the late 20th century. That last one is another subject for another time. So finally, I just want to give a few examples of attempts, yeah, to affirm what people try to do politically, yes, or try to produce politically through this understanding of an African identity. What you see on your screen is a picture of two men. One, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, and two, Baba Patrice Lumumba. Cut a long story short, Baba Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah comes to power in Ghana in 1957 and really is the first black nation to achieve this thing called independence. And he begins a program almost immediately of African unity, not just on the continent, but with the diaspora. One of the things that he does is he tries to form a union with the nation of Togo. The president to be Olympia in Togo was not too willing to go along with the program. So eventually in 1958, he signs the Ghana, Guinea, Mali Union with Modibo Keita and Sekou Touré. The idea being that in making ourselves independent, we should be no respecters of these colonial borders. And so he wanted to begin by creating a West African Union or a West African Federation, and anybody who was willing to come on the program with him, he roped into the program. So Modibo Keita and Sekou Touré of Guinea and Mali, respectively, were willing. So the Ghana, Guinea, Mali Union was signed in 1958. Then, when the Congo was made independent, yeah, in 1960, with Baba Patrice Lumumba as the prime minister, a secret agreement was signed in 1960 between these two men and their nations. Why secret? Because they understood that the colonizers were still about, and that Belgium and France in particular had significant interest in the Congo. Yes. And so they wanted to keep that one under wraps until they were in a better position to bring it forward and make it public. And the agreement was signed, and it says the president of the Republic of Ghana and the prime minister of the Republic of the Congo have given serious thought to the idea of African unity, and with the approval of the governments and peoples of their respective states, have decided to establish among themselves a union of African states. The union will have a republican constitution within a federal framework. The federal government will be responsible for foreign affairs, defense, the issues of common currency, economic planning and development. There would be no customs barriers between any parts of the federation. There would be a federal parliament and a federal head of state. The capital of the union should be in Leopoldville, which was in Congo. Yeah. Any states of territory in Africa, sorry, I should say any state or territory, forgive the typo, in Africa is free to join this union. The above union presupposes Ghana's abandonment of the Commonwealth. No, Ghana can't abandon the Commonwealth. No, Jamaica can't abandon the Commonwealth. We're hearing some good noises from Barbados at the moment about abandoning the Commonwealth and this preposterous situation of the monarch of England being the head of state in nations like Jamaica and Barbados all till now, with a governor general on the land. And when you want to deploy your army, you have to seek the permission of the Governor General, who operates on the authority of the British monarch. Foolishness. This was signed in 1960 by the Sergeant for Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba. What happened in 1961? Baba Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. Yes, by a CIA-backed coup, by an MI6-backed coup. And in 1966, the same forces that are responsible for assassinating Baba Patrice Lumumba facilitated a coup in the nation of Ghana. Gonna move swiftly on. I ain't gonna say nothing, just listen.
Most people, when we say Afro-American, they think only of the Negroes in the United States, but they don't realize that 2/3 of Brazil consists of people of African blood, which means they're also Afro-American because Brazil is in South America. And in all of these, many of these countries in South America and Central America, and even in Canada, they are heavily populated with people whose ancestors came from Africa. So when you total up the number of Afro-Americans, real Afro-Americans, in the Western Hemisphere, there are perhaps 100 million. And if these people ever unite among themselves, not only is it necessary for the Afro-Americans in the United States to be organized, but it's also necessary for the Afro-Americans in the Caribbean, or the Afro-Cubans, the Afro-Brazilians. It's necessary for all of them to be organized. And then once they are organized in each place, we have to organize among ourselves so that the Afro-American in the United States will be working in conjunction in a coordinated program with those who are in Cuba and those in Brazil and those in Venezuela and those throughout the Caribbean and Haiti and in the West Indian Islands. And in this way, we actually get strength. And it's not an accident that there's no organization existing in the Western Hemisphere that's designed toward that end. It would be a direct threat to imperialism as it really exists and to colonialism as it exists in the West. And one of the things that's going to help to bring this about is the independence of Africa. One of the only reasons that we in the West have never organized, we have hated our image and our African image. And because Africa has been in the hands of people who have created an image of Africa that's negative and hateful. And it has been hateful to us. We haven't wanted to identify with it. But now that Africa is getting independent and in a position to create its own image, and it's a positive image, those of us in the West look at the African image and see how positive it is. We begin to identify with it. We become proud of Africa, and we become proud of our African blood, our African heritage. And this is what is beginning to make the Africans in the Western Hemisphere today develop more race pride. And as this race pride develops, then it has a tendency to make us want to unite together and work together. And your Western imperialists and colonialists consider this to be a grave threat. More threat than communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else. The Africanism is what they consider to be the real threat.
You see the picture of Baba Patrice Lumumba on the wall behind Omowale Malcolm X, who is speaking in 1964. December, I believe, he's being interviewed by some students. I believe the students are from Congo, yeah? And so he's speaking in the context of developing the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And in 1963, he travels to the continent. I'm not going to read this, but this is just him speaking at the Audubon Ballroom in December of 1964. Basically speaking about the fact that he was able to get the then developing Organization of African Unity to pass a resolution of support for the plight of Africans in America on the basis of the fact that they are our African brothers and sisters, so to speak. Yeah, you can find that in a speech that was delivered at the Audubon Ballroom in December of 1964. For those who want to actually read it, I'm not going to read it for the sake of time. Again, moving on, not going to speak, just listen.
The real reason for all of this hostility is because
No, sorry, I should actually speak on this one because some people may not actually know who this is. Yeah, this is Maurice Bishop. Yes, Maurice Bishop was the Prime Minister of revolutionary Grenada. Yeah, between 1979 and 1983, Grenada was in the midst of a revolution. This is Maurice Bishop speaking at Hunter College in the United States of America in June of 1983, and he's about to tell the people packed at Hunter College about a secret report that he received that came from an American intelligence agency.
The real reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lead to a new socio-economic and political path of development. They give all kinds of reasons and excuses, some of them credible, some utter rubbish. There's an interesting one that we saw very recently in a secret report of the State Department. I want to tell you about that one, so you can reflect on that one. That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua, and the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States. I can see from your applause, sisters and brothers, that you agree with the report. But I want to tell you what that same report also said, and said that also made us very dangerous. And that is that the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada are predominantly black. They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic. And if we have 95% of predominantly African origin in our country, then we can have a dangerous appeal to 30 million black people in the United States. Now, that aspect of the report clearly is one of the most sensible ones.
Few months later, in fact, this month is the anniversary of the assassination of Baba Maurice Bishop. Yeah, killed. After which, the Americans were already planning an invasion of Grenada. They invaded the island following, and interestingly enough, in this same year, I'm forgetting the month, yeah, but Thomas Sankara visits America and speaks in Harlem and speaks on the assassination of Maurice Bishop. Also, just a bit of history there, kings and queens, but you heard exactly what he had to say. So I'm going to conclude it there. I just wanted to give some examples of how brothers and sister activists on a mass scale have used this idea of African identity for political power. As you can tell, I have dealt with a lot of macro and not a lot of micro, but that was intentional, because now we're going to get into a conversation with my brother and my sister in terms of delving into this subject a little bit more. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
So I hope that laid the foundation well. in a lot of ways. But yeah, I just want to get your thoughts, family, and welcome for everybody who's watching right about now all around the world. I haven't seen any of the comments yet, so apologies for that, because I was, screen sharing and them thing there. But feel free to ask questions, and if you want to come through, I'm going to share the link in a bit. I just want to hear the thoughts of Brother Omawale and Sister Jam on this subject first, and then we'll open up the lines a little bit more. Go ahead, Sister Jam.
Sure. So thank you for that presentation, Brother Shakara. That was really great and really in depth, and really laid the groundwork for this discussion. One of the things when it comes to African identity, I think what we end up doing is getting caught up in where we are placed and what we've been through. So I was so happy that you brought up Mama Marimba Ani. But I'll come back to that because I have a quote I want to share from her. But for me, in terms of African identity, it does three things. It provides us with access to each other, recognizing that no matter where we are across the world, that we have access to our Africanness and access to each other as a people, which then leads us to the second thing, which is connectedness. Once you realize that you have a connectedness, that you are one or one people, then it leads to the third thing, which is the possibility for collaboration, the possibility for building beyond the borders or the false borders that many of us live within. One of the biggest issues that I see right now, and you had alluded to it in your presentation, is we get caught up in these various identities that we actually had no control over forming or creating in the first place. And we get obsessed with this individualism and get obsessed with this, well, we're different because of this. And in reality is, yes, we have all of our different experiences, and we may have a special this or a special that, but all that specialness does not help us in terms of building and collaborating for overall liberation of African people. It doesn't mean that we don't recognize differences. It doesn't mean that at all, but to try to use the differences as a point to fragment does us a lot of harm. And I wanted to lift up this quote also from Let the Circle Be Unbroken. So Mama Anise says, yes, the trauma of slavery stripped us, but not of everything. It was the fact of being stripped that forced us to rely so heavily on worldview. So one of the things that we often miss, especially for those of us in the diaspora, is we went through slavery or we were disconnected in some way, and we think that that makes us different and shuts us off from the continent. But the way in which we actually survived was tapping into that African ethos in the first place. That's how we survived all this. Had we not had it, Lord knows what would have happened to us. But she says that worldview in turn forced us to make just enough sense of the insanity of slavery to create just enough of a belief system to enable us to reestablish on foreign ground that driving energy for a continued vital existence that is the birthright of all descendants of Africa. It was just enough, like finding the end of a thread. And then she continued, we made contact with a source of energy so powerful that it allowed us to withstand confrontation with the most destructive force in human history. We survived the disastrous implications of Western European domination. And there was one more part that I wanted to read. And then she continued on another page. We live in the chaos of North America, and so we lack the discipline inherent to traditional Africa. Yet, through all this, we have not become European. Even in our dehumanization, our ethos is African. And so that is one of the things that we miss in these conversations, especially I know those of us that identify as Black American or African American, that we have this false sense of belief that because of what we've been through and because we're on this foreign land, we're no longer African, and and we miss that the fact that we survived is based on our Africanness. And then there was another point that I wanted to uplift, because another conversation that's happening right here in the United States is this issue of, what are we? Are we Black Americans? Are we American descendants of slavery? Or what are we in terms of how we identify with ourselves and other people that are of African descent?
Yeah.
And much of that has to do, the whole conversation itself has to do with the mass miseducation of our people that Baba Carter G. Woodson warned us of, and the whole purpose behind his Black History Week that turned into month was to lead us down the road to maintaining this understanding of our cultural awareness. You can stop me if I'm talking too much.
Talk.
Okay, but I wanted to also, that led me to another point, that by disconnecting ourselves from African history, we actually disconnect ourselves from our future, because we don't have a sense of our capabilities. We don't have a sense of our past that roots us to be able to have that confidence that Baba Marcus Garvey said we need to have and able to lift up as a people. So I went back in preparation for this discussion to the Introduction to African Civilization by John G. Jackson, and Baba Henrik Clark wrote a very intense introduction. But in it, he cited a Barbadian writer, Richard B. Moore, who also uplifts this significance of connecting ourselves in African history and how it connects to what we're dealing with today. So he cites Richard Moore, and Moore says the significance of African history is shown, though not overtly, in the very effort to deny anything worthy of the name of history to Africa and the African peoples. The widespread and well-nigh successful endeavor maintained through some 5 centuries to erase African history from the general record is, in fact, which of itself should be quite conclusive to thinking and open minds. The prime significance of African history becomes still more manifest when it is realized that the deliberate denial of African history arose out of the European expansion and invasion of Africa, which began in the middle of the 15th century. The compulsion was thereby felt to attempt to justify such colonial conquest, domination, enslavement, and plunder. Hence the brash denial of history and culture to Africa, and indeed even of human qualities and capacity for civilization in the indigenous peoples of Africa. So what Moore is saying is the importance of African history and the denial of it is directly connected to our personhood and how we're treated in this world and in the different places that we're placed in the diaspora. Just as Malcolm X was talking about, once we gain respect and power over the continent of Africa, it will be dispersed to those of us in the diaspora. So this idea that African history has no bearing or no meaning to us as those of us in the diaspora really is an attempt at, and a long-standing attempt at erasing our peoplehood and erasing the respect and the dignity that we must have as an African people in order to move forward.
Thank you, sis. Go ahead, Omwale.
All right, peace to my sister Jam, my brother Shaka Ra. So definitely hard to follow up my sister Jam Awuyar, but I will try to share my insight. First and foremost, brother Shaka Ra, as always, the presentation was brilliant. It goes without saying that I absolutely agree with much of the anecdotes that were shared, by Dr. Marimba Ani, Professor Amos Wilson, Maurice Bishop. Like, these are things that I certainly agree with as a Pan-Africanist. But what I would start by saying is that one thing that is crucial for us to understand is that identity is inherently political, right? I was watching a presentation Dr. Greg Carr does these Saturday schools on Karen Hunter. And he made a quote. I don't know if he took it from someone else or it was original to him, but he basically stated that migration is the central theme of all human history, right? When we look at history, one thing that is common is that people moved either through forced migrations or through voluntary migrations. And as a part of those different patterns, oftentimes we get different name changes. We identify ourselves differently, but that doesn't. I apologize if it's too loud in the background. That doesn't change the essential nature of who we are as a people. And I think that a lot of the confusion, well, first and foremost, the confusion is subsidized, right? In order for the system of white minority rule to be maintained on a global basis, it has to be facilitated through the miseducation process, right? They have to capture your memory, and they have to captivate you with a false consciousness that keeps you, linked to their system, right? And in order to do that, it becomes a necessity to fragment your thinking. Our understanding of even the slave experience is greatly impoverished as a people, which is sad. Given the fact that so much research has been done by African-centered and Afrocentric scholars, the large majority of us still have a great impoverishment when it comes to understanding this experience, right? So what I would say is that oftentimes the first mistake that we make is when we examine the plantation. We often examine it at a micro and not a macro level. And I think that we need to have the ability to do both, right? Because, and I'll use some anecdotes here, right? Some examples. When Frederick Douglass was writing in the slave narratives, he talked about the different experiences between slaves in America who were, or enslaved Africans in America who were enslaved on different plantations. And he said that certain of our people would take pride in the fact that they were enslaved to a master who had a very grand plantation with thousands of slaves and lots of wealth, and they took pride in their ability to help that master build that wealth. And they would look down on our brothers and sisters who were on neighboring plantations who may have had a master who could only afford one slave or two slaves, right? So at a micro level, when we raise that same analysis to the macro level, for me, my analysis is that under white supremacy, the world becomes a plantation. Right. So, you have, enslaved people who were enslaved on the colonies in America, looking at our brothers and sisters who were enslaved, in Jamaica or Haiti or St. Thomas, or even enslaved in the land of our ancestors in places like Nigeria, right, which was a colonial creation. We look down on these other plantations or people that come from these plantations. We take pride. We help to build the greatest nation on earth, the wealth of America. The wealth of America. We are the foundation. We are the foundational Black Americans, so to speak. But again, it speaks to a great poverty of consciousness, because it just points to the fact that we really don't understand the way that the slave system worked and operated, right? First and foremost, this was a corporate enterprise. And how do we know this through many different ways. One example, I was down in New Orleans, I think about 2 years ago, and I visited the Whitney plantation. And I actually had a chance to interview this author, Gwendolyn Midlow. She put together the Louisiana slave database, where she was able to track essentially the origins of many of the Africans who came through that port. And the reason that she was able to do it is because essentially the database is made up of people who came from the African continent that were on corporate vessels, right? So you had two different things going on. You had like your private or enterprising slavers who would basically, go out and get their own vessel and go over to the continent. But then you had actually businesses, industry, who would have their ships insured, would have their corporations chartered, and all of those documents exist. So we were able, or they were able to trace that. So what does that mean for us as a people? When you understand slavery in its proper context, you see that there are corporate interests that owned interests in plantations in Haiti, plantations in the American South, plantations in St. Thomas, right? But when we have these discussions today on things like reparations, our focus is so narrow. But I understand why our focus is narrow, right? Because in order for us to navigate white supremacy or to negotiate with white supremacy, it's impossible to do it as a collective. You have to do it as an individual. So you have all these movements around the globe that seek to disaggregate the global African population so that we can navigate as individual or negotiate as individual populations. So I don't want to negotiate with white supremacy. Me, period. I don't want to negotiate with white supremacy. I want to end it. But those who seek to negotiate or try to advance themselves within it, not overthrow it, but attain some comfort within that particular plantation system, the only way for them to do that is to embrace an identity by which they can be viewed as an individual, so to speak, right? So it's my wife referred to it as like the divestment movement by another name. Just it's the same as how you have certain black women who want to divest from Blackistan, and attach themselves to a white person so they can get access to resources. It's the same thing with certain black populations. We want to divest ourselves from the rest of the black world because we think that by doing so we'll serve a better chance of getting some type of repair and or redress from our enemies. And I think that speaks to the insanity that I started the conversation off with.
Psychosis. Yeah, all right, let me ask you both a question, because I like I said, my where I went was very macro, and I think that's important. But oftentimes I agree with Omwale, like we need to do both. But I feel like the micro, what people perceive to be the macro, kind of stagnates us, lose our capacity to take on to view the world, in to some degree. And what I mean is that people are looking at food, clothing, and shelter, right? People are looking at their immediate circumstances, you know what I'm saying? Over here, it's Brexit, right? And leaving the European Union, it's COVID-19 for the world right about now. You lot got the most important election of a generation coming up, as was the previous election, and the election before that was the most important election of the generation, right? I'm not sure where where those elections now stand in the hierarchy. However, these appear to be primary issues, and some might say, to play advocate for a second, that everything that you said is all well and good, brother Omwale, but you're living in a fantasy land. The reality is, all this divestment that you're talking about and not negotiate with the system, but you work, you pay taxes, you know what I'm saying? Your children probably go to school, and all these kinds of things. So it's all well and good saying these things, but it's a fantasy. The reality is you are an American citizen, bro. Right? You know what I'm saying? In America, and therefore your identity is American, and you just need to stop dealing with this African fantasy foolishness and deal with the reality of your life right about now. How do you respond to something like that?
Like I said, I take a plantation analysis. So first and foremost, my analysis is always informed by history, right? Because history allows us to put the current moment within its proper context, right? So when we were enslaved on the plantation back then, I really look at it as no different than today. For an example, one of the arguments that people often make, and I don't think I'm going off on a tangent. I think this stays where you are. But one of the arguments that people often make is this concept of, taxation without representation, right? Like, this is our government. We pay taxes to it. Therefore, we should be able to, ask of this government to do for us. Well, when you look at the when you look at the colonial reality, right, the way that a colony is financed is via taxation without representation, right? When they conquered the African continent, and they created these different colonial entities, they would exact what's referred to as a hut tax. So if you, as an African, right, so what they do in order to even bring you into a colonial arrangement, right?
Yes.
The first thing that you have to do is say, hey, listen, you have to sign this order of protection. What this means is that, you know, I'm Britain, that's France, this is Belgium. If you say that, you know, you essentially become a protectorate of mine, you know, then France and Belgium won't come in and rape you. They won't come in and molest you. But if you don't sign yourself to be a protectorate of mine, then these other European nations are going to come in and victimize you, right? So essentially, they do that after they defeat you. Okay, you sign this protectorate, you become a colony. As a part of being colonized, you have to pay a tax to finance your colonization. You understand what I'm saying? So when people talk about, you know, we go to school, we obey the rules. Well, these are all conditions of being a dominated people, right? But also during plantation, I mean, there were slave codes, there were laws in terms of that slaves had to abide by in order to operate within the slave system. But we also had insurrectionists, right? So these people, you know, when Nat Turner was you know, planning his rebellion, it ain't like, you know, he just like, you know, stepped off the plantation and was like, I'm not gonna pick cotton today. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna opt out of picking cotton. You understand what I'm saying? Like, no, he did what he had to do while he was on the plantation, but his goal was always freedom. So it's the same thing for us. The goal is always separation. The goal is always self-determination. The goal is always sovereignty. But we recognize that we exist on the plantation, right? I mean, they've created, and this is one of the reasons why I'm always critical of these so-called, I refer to them as money mountain activists, the people who believe that, you know, financial liberation is going to free us from our oppressor, because my position is that, you know, there is no black power in white dollars. Like, he controls the monopoly board, meaning that he controls the land. So revolution has always been first and foremost about regaining the land, regaining access to the land, because the land is your, you know, your source of food, clothing, and shelter. I hope I'm not going too far off on a tangent here, but I'm really just trying to make the argument that, you know, when people make these kind of like remedial or elementary type arguments, I mean, like, you know, when you spend money, you're spending money that like has their face on it. You're spending money whose value is tied to their system, you know, essentially staying in power. So does that mean because I'm spending this dollar that I support the system, or is that some type of contradiction? Like me still trying to overthrow the system? Like, no, I don't think that that's an intelligent, you know, response or critique. What I think it is a distraction or a red herring, because people don't really want you focused or talking about liberation, especially when they truly don't want to be liberated. They try to throw these things out in order to kind of like dissuade you or cause confusion as to, you know, aims and objectives around liberation.
Anything to add, Sister Jam?
Yeah, I think that for some people they need it spelled out, and we need to draw the connections. So this concept that we're American and we just need to forget about everything else, once you pull out like, well, if we're American, how come the 13th Amendment didn't really eradicate slavery, and how come we still basically have slavery in our country, and that or in our country in quotation marks, how is it that we have this massive criminal injustice system in which so many of our brothers and sisters are so easily entrapped within it, that it's to the point where they plan prisons because they plan it based on a lot of statistics and frameworks, which they know is going to entrap more Black and brown populations, is done on purpose. If we were fully Americans, we wouldn't have to fight for the right to vote. Voting, I know, is a very controversial issue in Pan-African studies and Pan-Africanism in general. But to be honest, we still do not have the right to vote. Like in the United States, Black people are fighting for the right to vote. Right. Like voter suppression is real. If you go down south and in Georgia, they are they're taking away all of the different polling stations. You show up and then the machines don't work. It's a real significant issue from Georgia to Detroit to Philadelphia. Like, they are making it hard as possible. And when I say they, we can say, yes, we talk about Republicans and versus Democrats, but Democrats aren't really trying that hard either. Not as hard as they actually could to make sure that voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression doesn't continue the way that, I mean, this happens every 4 years.
Yes.
And folks act surprised. But and we know it's coming, but no one does anything to really stop it in a major significant way. So we have masses of Black people that are subjected to mass incarceration. We have no or limited voting rights. We have at any moment someone can be killed while they're sleeping, and little to nothing will happen. As long as the police feel like they can get away with it, they will. Pretty much our lives are endangered on an everyday basis, but we're American. And the fact remains that someone that is of European descent, no matter where they come from in the world, can come to the United States as an immigrant or whatever else and gain more benefits to this American identity than people of African descent that have been here for 400 years. And that is why it does us of no positive avail to be arguing with Black immigrants versus those of us that have been here 400 years. Either way, somebody could be shot and killed on the street, just like Amadou Diallo, and little to nothing be done about it. We have not reached that American ideal. We have not ever been full American citizens. And I think that is one of the things that people is just not clicking. Like, the reason why there's not clean water in Flint, Michigan is because of the Black population. If it was a all white population, that situation would be different. And we can connect that to the situations that our brothers and sisters deal with in Nigeria, with not having clean drinking water, with companies like Shell making it harder for them to get access, and making and doing all types of environmental racism. These are things that happen on the micro level, but people don't often connect it to the global struggle, or we get caught up in these ideas that we don't really see what's happening in front of us. Are you really American if you don't have these basic rights? Right. Yes, you pay taxes, but do you really have representation when a president can win the popular vote but not be president? You can show up to the voting booth, the machines don't work. They take away your polling station. You could be shot at any moment and killed and nothing happened. Are you really what you think you are? Or are you an African in America and this is your experience? And I think it takes some time, but those are some of the connections that need to be made on the micro level for people to understand what's really happening.
Definitely.
Can I ask Sister Jam a question?
You can, bro. Let me just say though, I'm gonna post the link in the chat so anybody who wants to come on can. Or the only criteria is respect. Yeah, any disrespect will be dealt with the swiftest of exiting from the panel. Yeah, no tolerance for disrespect right there. So yeah, feel free to come through if you have a question or comment to make in addition to the conversation. And yes, go ahead, brother Omwale.
So, Sister Jam, you just named a lot about our conditions today in terms of our ability to be murdered. Us having no protection from the state and or the government, things like that. So my question would be, how is that in any way different from our experience during the slave period? What we experience today, would you make an argument that it's different, or would you make an argument that it's still the same?
I would make an argument that it is an extension of what our ancestors went through, but we are not going through the exact thing that our ancestors went through.
Okay.
I don't want to minimize what they went through.
Okay.
But I do argue that it is an extension of what they went through for sure.
Okay. Respect to that.
This question is an interesting one, and I'm not sure, Richard Wright, if you're referring to a specific organization or a general kind of movement. Yeah. So isn't the global economic political African project centered in the creation of African identity? I would answer yes in many ways to that. But I'm not sure if when you, because you've got all capitals here, so these all capitals are throwing me off when you say global African political African project. I'm not sure if that's a specific thing, and if it is, I'm not aware of it. So if it is, can you just please give us more information? The link is in the chat, family. So if you want to come through, make a contribution, statement, ask a question, interact. You know what I'm saying? Say big up Omawale, you know what I'm saying? Bless Sister Jam. Feel free to come through and reason with us. You know what I'm saying? You know what I love about this panel, right? Is that all three of us have children, and it's like, you know, you know what I'm saying? Every now and then I can see the vibes, you know what I mean? But it's beautiful things and trees, you know. Pan-Africanists are family people too, you know what I'm saying? That's how it goes.
Yeah, peace, brother Rich. That's my elder, brother Richard White.
All right, okay.
Question. Let me ask another question, and any of you can answer this.
Yes.
Are you all familiar with Denmark VC?
Of course.
All right. So okay, I'm not even going to ask a question. What I'll say is this: I noticed that Yvette Carnell, you know, used him. I think he was probably the first person they used for the ADOS book club that they have, and I found it very interesting because his life speaks to the you know, his life negates the claims of ADOS.
Mhm.
Or, you know, or the lineage claims of ADOS, right? Because they claim him as ADOS, but Denmark VC was born in St. Thomas, enslaved for a period of time in Haiti. But because he had epilepsy, he couldn't do field work. So the ship captain who sold him into Haiti, the plantation owner that he sold him to said, "Hey, you sold me defective goods, so I want my money back." Yes. So he ended up becoming a servant of the ship captain, who, when the ship captain retired to South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And Denmark VC becomes one of the founders or co-founders of the AME in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. The AME is the vehicle through which the South Carolina or through which the African War of Liberation was being planned. Mm-hmm. The insurrection, of course, it was snitched on. You know, just like today, you know what I mean? Like, you know, people have their snitching ways. Like you'll be online saying don't vote, and somebody will jump in your mentions and like, hey, does that mean you're trying to get guns and go to war with the United States? Like, yo, like how do you even, like, that's one of those things where, you know, it's a form of like dry snitching almost. It's like, hey, this dude is trying to do something outside of the system, master, so you should pay attention to him because he's a potential threat. And like lots of our people do that today. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up Denmark VC because I think he completely negates their concept of, like, you know, so-called ADOS you know lineage, because it's silliness, you know, to its core. You know, because I saw someone when I shared this panel on Twitter, someone said, well, you should have ADOS on the panel. And I don't identify as ADOS, but my ancestors in this country, I can trace back 200 years. You know, that's just on my father's side, patrilineal. I mean, on the matrilineal side of my father. So through my father's mother, I can trace back 200 years. My family is down in Georgia. On my mother's side, you know, I can trace back to Alabama, but they go back so deep, like I could never give you a point of origin. So you can't get any more ADOS than that, you know what I mean? But it's silliness for them to make, like, I will never claim that particular label that they have embraced in an attempt to use it as a vehicle to negotiate with the United States government to make some type of claim for reparations, which is just like complete silliness. So
right, we got a couple of people that want to interact with us. I think that a bigger glaring omission, and it's not really an omission, it's just circumstances, but like I said, our brother Abiola wasn't able to join us, and so it would have been preferential for me to have an African from the continent on the panel, because the idea is that Africans on the continent do not identify with this idea or concept of African and Pan-Africanism. But thankfully, we open with Auntie Affion, so that at least should do it. Brother IC3, greetings. I can see you're in full uniform. You're
this is wonderful subject. African power. That's it. So now we're starting to get serious. That's right. When the word power comes in.
Most definitely.
Big up to all the panel, and it's excellent so far. Very good. Very good.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Brother Richard.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear y'all are developing it like you're doing. Yeah, I'll say that. But I one thing that, you know, and what my question was, and I think that as Brother Shakara, as you did your piece, what I liked was that you were looking at different generations, and right now I'm looking at y'all as that generation, right? You know, the generation that was Malcolm, the generation that was with you know, that Bishop was with. Those were different generations that are still here, that are Pan-African, a part of this Pan-African project. And that's why I consider this Global Africans a project. And I think Brother Omawale makes it clear when I say economic and political, because we're talking about creating a global African geopolitical state, which includes the continent. And it is a continuation from what, you know, Paul Cuffey, Delaney, Garvey, you know, this is a continuation of that same project. And I think we shouldn't get lost in looking at others and their project as it was defined. That's what I was trying. Hopefully, I was trying to communicate.
My brother.
Okay, really quick, Brother Shakara. Brother Rich raises an excellent point that I think ties into the identity question when he brings up, you know, Cuffey and Delaney and folks from the 19th century, because Du Bois has a lecture where he's talking about the African Revolution, and he talks very clearly, because you know Du Bois being a great historian, and talks about the fact that Black people in America never ever had a problem with identifying as African up until the American colonial society was seeking to forcefully migrate some of us from this nation. At that point, that's when you started to get the first groups of Black people saying, oh, wait. I'm not African. I'm an American Negro. I don't know no African. So it's like the same thing today. Like, we need an identity, or not we, those people who desire to attach themselves to America, they need an identity to, you know, more firmly affix themselves to their master at risk of being separated. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that fear of being separated from America, they like, hey, like, you know, don't you see me with this flag on, massa? You know what I mean? I'm one of your descendants. You know, I'm a descendant of American slavery. You should like really, you know, kind of like take care of me. And it's like, they were very purposeful in putting the American in the front. And even, you know, with Tariq Nasheed's FBA, they're very purposeful in putting red, white, and blue like in the colors, because they want to make sure that they are attaching themselves to America. But historically, Black people have never had any question. Like, all of our institutions, you know, had African right on the front, like every single one of them historically. But up until the point where they created the American Colonization Society to start, you know, trying to get rid of the free Africans in this country, that's when Black people here started to say, hold on, I'm not an African, I'm something else. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that's raises a good point in terms of identity.
Extremely important point, bro. In fact, whilst everybody's here, I actually have a presentation on this channel called "What's Wrong with Being African" that details a lot of the history that Brother Omawale just laid out. So do check that out. I know you've got your time is limited, Sister Jamia, so I don't want to abuse it, but I do want to ask you both a question. There is a statement that has been made to me a number of times, and that is the idea that American is primary because African identity has no political validity, yes, and no political standing within the American political system, and so therefore it is unviable. It has no political value, no political cachet. Yeah. How do you respond to that claim and that idea?
I would first ask, political value to who? To who and why? Right. So if we're talking about appealing to just the United States government, maybe you can question that. But even in that appeal, they still face problems, right? Because we didn't come here through spontaneous combustion. So even in the argument, like, let's take what we've been talking about, reparations and ADOS and all of that stuff, and placing the American in the front for a political reason, we hit different issues for one, you don't descend from slavery. And there are other people in this country that could make the argument that they too are American descendants of slavery, right? But if you want to be specific, then you have to not be afraid to say descendants of Africans that were enslaved in the United States, because then you are specifically calling out the point that the reason we're having this conversation is I am an African on a foreign land, and how did I get here? Which country played a role? Which year and what years and did it happen? And the years are even contentious. If we say 1619, then that includes the British government. If we say 1776, then we are trying to target the United States government, but that wasn't even fully constitutionally formed at that point. So it causes all these issues politically, even when we try to run away from our Africanness, because then we're not even able to say we have a framework or starting point for acknowledging how we even got in this system in the first place.
Brother Mwale?
I don't have anything to say. I agree with everything my sister Jam said.
Right, cool.
So first and foremost, because this is Sister Jam's first introduction to your channel, Sister Jam Awuyar is one of the most brilliant Pan-African minds of our generation. So whenever she speaks, I really just enjoy listening.
Listen, I'm telling you.
I really value, she brings the fire every time I'm on a panel with her. So I appreciate you, Sister Jam, for sure.
Well, I got to appreciate you, Brother Omwale, because you introduced me to the sister. I met her on your platform. So, you know, so yeah. And ever since, you know, yeah. But you know what? Sorry, actually, tell a lie. I realized a while ago, sister, I'd come across one of your tweets a long time ago, reading your article, because I actually saw the tweet at the time when you was responding to Brother Sandy Darity about his use of Queen Mother Moore. I remember that tweet, but I just didn't place it at the time. So yeah, give facts on that, because yeah, sorry, can I make this point? I take the ancestors very seriously. Yeah. So when people misuse and misrepresent the ancestors, like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I take it very seriously. I do not, and I've seen it more than once in relation to everybody from Omowale Malcolm X to Khalid Muhammad to Queen Mother Moore to Amos Wilson. I take these people very seriously. And I think it is the height, yeah, of disrespect, yeah, to deliberately misrepresent the words and the deeds and the intentions of our ancestors. I want to make that very clear, yeah. It's not a joke, yeah, and I'm not giving into emotionalism. All people that have self-pride take their ancestors very seriously, yeah. And so I want to implore people to stop it, yeah. Stop using the ancestors, especially our nationalist, pan-Africanist ancestors, to justify foolishness. It's very wrong. You don't have to do it. Represent your own thing on your own terms. But keep Amos Wilson out your mouth. Yeah? Keep Queen Mother Moore out your mouth. Yeah? It's just wrong. Sorry. Right there. Sorry. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is in terms of the power and significance of African identity, what Brother Rich was trying to hit on earlier was the fact that African identity is something that is aspirational, right? It's something that we as Pan-Africanists aspire to, attain and cultivate in order to build power, because power is what is needed for us to overthrow this particular system that currently oppresses and enslaves us. And the only way for us to attain that power is through our collective identity. Right, or collective unity, so to speak. Like right now and all around the African world, what we have to come to realize is that coming out of colonization, the colonizers, starting in America, came up with a plan for how to miseducate the formerly enslaved population. So when we look back at like the Mohawk Conference in 1890, that conference really laid out the model for how to miseducate the African world. So when all of the colonies on the African continent got their so-called flag independence, one of the things that the former colony or the former colonizer maintained control over, they maintained control over military, they maintain control over economy, but very importantly, they maintain control over education, right? So all of us have been thoroughly miseducated, and we saw that, you know, starting in the early 20th century, you see this movement I don't know if it's an early Black studies movement or, you know, an early Black power movement, whatever you want to call it, but you see it budding in America. You see parts of it with like negritude in France. You see, you know, in South America with is it Black consciousness? But even right now in Brazil, like there's this massive kind of like Black awakening that's happening in Brazil. But the challenge today with the awakening happening in 21st century is that when Black people wake up to their Blackness, it's right away is captured and pulled into another bucket. So like in Brazil and South Africa, for example, Black people who are waking up to this Black identity or Black consciousness, right away they get snatched up by like the LGBTQ movement or the feminist movement, because those are the people who control the spaces of ideology and discourse, meaning the college campus. And so it's like I wake up and I learn that I'm Black. So let me go and learn about what it means to be Black. And I go and, you know, I go to the so-called authorities who are the people on the campus, and all of the authorities are coming from a certain particular lens that is not truly a Black lens. So it's like you woke up from your sleep only to be recaptured and sent down another path that's going to send you into a new land of confusion. So I think that that's what we have to contend with today in terms of, like, you know, trying to construct this aspirational identity to give us power to liberate ourselves.
Definitely. I do want to say this. I'm going to bring in Afrika, because I'm sure he has something to say. Brother IC3, I know you're a man who likes the conversation, but if you want to say anything, then just, you know, you can let me know. What's it? But in respect of this, oh, it's gone out my head now. Yes. Because the importance of this conversation at this present moment in time is that there's a number of pro-Black, anti-African movements popping up. And they're not just ADOS. A lot of the Black Hebrews are very, very virulently, vociferously anti-African. And this we are the indigenous peoples of everywhere but Africa. What's it called? Movement. Is also very anti-African, and so we can collectively put all these groups, including ADOS, into the ABA, anything but African movement, right? And funnily enough, they tend to have solidarity with each other, like you know, Black Hebrew Israelites, seem to support ADOS. And vice versa, even though they believe that their homeland is Israel. It's madness. I'm just making that point so that we put it in its proper full context, that we're not just talking about ADOS individually. Right, Afrika.
Greetings, everybody. Can I be heard?
You can be heard, my brother.
Excellent, thanks, because I had a few technical problems before, which I apologize for if it disrupted anything. It's really great to see three giants, in my estimation, hosting this evening of building. So greetings to you and thanks to you three particularly. I do want to take slight, how can I say, I don't really want to call it take an issue, but I do want to kind of get a little bit more defined, because my brother Omawale, you know, who I respect greatly, did mention this thing a while ago about how people become awakened and then get snatched up by the prevalent I would call them anti-revolutionary movements that are out. And I think that's the point that I really wanted to focus on. I don't think that they are anti-Black movements, because I think Blackness, we have to understand how broad it actually is and not have it in this very kind of solid, fossilized, historically based kind of idea of what it is, but really what it is in reality. And then we have to differentiate those Black people who are revolutionary, the ones that, I think that the most useful division is those who are revolutionary and radical, those who are regressive and, in actual fact, integrationist. And that's the real division. And then when we're coming to the point of identifying ourselves now, is it really about being African, or even, for that matter, Black as an identity? or is it about us understanding that identity and, of course, linking to Africa and centralizing it? But the key thing is, are we for revolution or are we for integrating into the system? And we somehow have to make that delineation very clear. And I'm afraid to say that Pan-Africanism hasn't been good at doing that, making that we're about. I think that's so I wondered what people had to say about that. I'm sorry it's a bit long, but I think hopefully you got the direction I'm going in.
Brother Afrika in true form, you know what I'm saying? It wouldn't be you, bro, if the question didn't come like that. So we give thanks. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? As I said, different strokes, you know what I'm saying, for different folks. So any of you can respond to that, brother Omwale, sister Jam.
I don't know what the question was, brother.
Okay.
I was listening intently to try to hear the question.
Yeah, shall I clarify what the question is actually? Because it was more, to be frank, it was more of a speech than a question. So let me get the question properly defined. How can you define what is essentially African or Black and what is not essentially African and Black?
Excellent.
Given that what we're looking for is a future reality. It's not something that we have now.
So what I would argue, because I think there's two parts to your question in terms of how do you define what is African and or Black. So for me personally, when I speak of Africanness, I'm speaking of Blackness, right? I like to use Dr. Obadeli Kambone or Okunini Obadeli Kambone. Always when he writes African equals Black, so that people understand that if you're not Black, you're not African. Like that's perspective. Like to the extent that you are in Africa and you're not Black is to the extent that you are the descendant of someone who either invaded or currently is an oppressor or occupier within the African continent. So for me, first and foremost, African equals Black. But I think the second part of your question kind of like challenges, or it seems like you want to challenge the notion of like, is there an essential like African way or an essential Africanness? And I would most likely defer, which my brother Shaka Ra did at the beginning of his lecture, where he referenced Sheikh Anta Diop's the cultural unity of Black Africa, which recognizes that there is great diversity, right, within Africanness or within Blackness, but at the same time, there are some core tenets that you see within each of these diverse bodies. And one thing that we know from studying African people through our worldview is that African culture is life affirming, right? It it is very connected to the natural world, so to speak. It's very holistic, so to speak, and it has this. I think it's without going too far off on a soapbox. What I'll cut my statement short by saying that African culture is life affirming. So if something is anti-life, in my perspective, it is anti-African. Like I could really end my sentence end my statement with that. So
one sec, bro. Anything to add, Sister Jam? Don't feel like you have to.
I was trying to unmute. I think one of the greatest connectors across African societies is our focus on the communal. And so when we get into these thoughts and these spaces that highly emphasize the individual, not that we don't care about what happens to the individual, but the individual is connected to the other individual, which is connected to the other individual, which impacts the society as a whole. And that is a distinct African cultural retention that we've even maintained in the diaspora, which is how we stayed alive. And so when we get into certain ideals or ideologies that emphasize individualism over the collective, we know we're getting into a territory that drives us further away from African thought or African ideals.
Can I ask a question, or make a comment, and ask a question? The point of the pan.
Sorry, Brother Richard. Sorry, I'm coming to you, IC3. Yeah, I've seen you. Just want to acknowledge that you raised your hand. Go ahead, Brother Richard. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brother Richard.
My thought is because I'm looking at it as a pan-African project. That's a long-term project. We're looking at a long view, and I that's one that we're looking at a long view from a historical point, and from an identity creation point. I'm wondering, when you raised about Sheikh Anta Diop's 3 axes that he mentioned, and history being one of those that we developed, that as far as a part of identity creation, does Chancellor Williams and what he laid out in his project in assisting us to show how our civilizational development and the internalness of that we have to deal with as Pan-Africanists to deal with a global is the destruction of Black civilization and the historical identification, where we as Pan-Africanists have to be able to continue in this project of creating our African identity from a power and geopolitical perspective. And I want to emphasize the geopolitical, and not necessarily veer off into the other groups, because our project is a tedious and difficult one in itself, because there's variations amongst us.
Yes.
So my question is about Chancellor William being providing the history and a long view in dealing and keeping it centered in a Pan-African project.
That's an interesting one. Sorry, I want to answer that question, but I know IC3's had that for a while, and we've got 2 other people in the panel. Yeah, so let me get.
I wanted to come back as well, if possible.
Oh yes, very quickly, bro.
Very briefly. I'll limit myself just to the idea of life affirming. That being Africanist is life affirming. Does it therefore affirm the life and living, the liberty, let's say, of those who are marginalized? Because these are the specific people now who are at the forefront of the ideologies that compete with those of us who are thinking geopolitically, who are thinking African global unity. So primarily to Brother Omowale, and obviously to the others on the panel, does the African identity affirm, and is it life affirming to those who live differently to the historic pattern?
Yes, I would argue that in African culture we affirm all life. I don't care what your individual practice is, but we definitely do not preference the individual over the group, right? Because the training and lessons that are provided to the group through the passing down of culture, this is what allows us to survive as a group. But when you're talking about people in the margins right now, you're talking about, in my opinion, and this is nobody else's on the panel's opinion, like I think that you are dealing with a lot of toxic products of Western society. Right, Garvey used to say, if the Black man is not careful, he'll drink in all the the poison of Western society and die from the effects of it. So for me, I affirm all life of Black people. I don't care what your lifestyle is. I affirm your life and your right to live. And I don't critique people as individuals. I critique the social milieu that develops them. Right, and in order to control the kind of like incubator that develops the people, you have to be self-determining. We as African people are not self-determining. Therefore, the cultures that we practice are largely foreign to us, or certainly are not the cultures that our ancestors practice. So what do I mean by that? the analogy that I always give, and Sister Jam, I know you have to leave shortly, so I want you to just be able to say something. So I'll cut off in 2 seconds, and I'll let you go right after me. But the analogy that I always give when it comes to dealing with people who are so-called marginalized, right, is if I was to go to a pond and I was to cast my rod into this pond and I pull out a fish that has 2 heads. My analysis or my focus wouldn't be on the fact that you have this 2-headed fish, and that is an aberration from the norm. My focus would be, man, there must be something wrong with this water for this water to be producing fish that have 2 heads, right? This water, must be toxic, right? So what I mean by that is, when we have marginalized people in our community, I would never critique them or their behavior. I would critique the society that has produced them, so to speak. So that's my perspective and how I deal with that. But I would never not affirm their life or fight to protect their life. That's just my perspective.
Thank you very much, Brother Omwale. Brother IC3.
Well, I'll let you know the question, but I don't think you better address it
right now.
Because so right
go
now.
Ahead.
So it was going to take a bit more time. I'll just ask a question anyway. Basically, I just want Brother Omowale to expound on the changing from African focus to Black identity. He said that the idea, everybody had no problem identifying themselves as African in the early parts of America. Then something changed, you said, and then the Black and African became an issue. So I found that very interesting. I want to dig into something on that, but I'll let other people speak, and then I'll listen to what Brother Omowale had to say.
I'll answer
on that.
Ground, but I want to respect our Sister Jam's time, because I know she has 2 young children. So Sister Jam, if you have anything you want to add in closing, I'll give you the time to do that.
Thank you. So I can't remember who it was. It might have been Brother Richard that brought up Chancellor Williams and the emphasis on the geopolitical. And I think that one of the things that we have to understand as Pan-Africanists and as people that are building towards a new world for African people, or not necessarily a new world, but a world that functions the way it should function to protect the lives and sustain the lives and civilization of African people moving forward. One of the things that we can't necessarily get hung up on is the trying to draw in all the different aspects of, how do I say this the best way? We ideally want all African people, all people of African descent as a part of this Pan-Africanist project. But dealing with the various ideologies that we have to deal with and the different frameworks and ideals that people come into this space with, I think that the work has to continue even if we don't get full buy-in.
Yes, sis.
And I believe that the buy-in comes as successes come. So as you're building up like this moving forward of this newfound or sustained Black civilization with a geopolitical center, some people just will not believe it until they see it.
Yes,
and then there will be others that, because we're dealing with so much misinformation and propaganda, will be blind to it until it comes into fruition or there are steps taken. So if you look at a lot of Black revolutionaries, especially those that are on the continent, there were steps taken that was on behalf of the people of their country. It didn't necessarily include all different ideals or ideologies. It's not to be exclusive, but it's just the understanding of those that have the plan move forward with the plan. And I don't know a better way of saying this. I'm much better at writing out these kind of thoughts. But the point is that in building up a geopolitical pan-Africanist project that is going to really require those of us that already identify with pan-Africanism and its understandings to put our full energy into creating and moving forward without being stalled by not having certain groups among our people buy into.
I agree, sis. I agree. Can I add to that? Yeah. To a significant degree, in my humble opinion and observation, the material reality, to some degree, will fix our business if we don't fix it ourselves from a proactive point of view. Case in point, in the 1960s, the revolutionary African leaders around the world were saying we need to disregard these colonial borders because these nation states are economically unviable. We have a better chance of servicing the needs of our people by reforming or reshaping these borders or getting rid of them completely, because even economically speaking, the resources in this nation and that nation are better utilized if they are governed with one political mind. Yes, what is happening now is that because of 70 years of abject failure on the part of these neo-colonial states to service the needs of the masses of the people, now we're seeing the push towards regional integration. Yes, economically, without the political infrastructure. Yes, to manage that regional integration, because nobody wants to let go of their individual quote-unquote Bantustan. Yes, in that regard. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to let go of their local enclave. Yeah, of the plantation. All right, and so we're seeing that after all this time of saying, well, we don't want to respect these borders. Now you've got ECOWAS and East African Federation taking place, and it's all good developments, right, in some way, shape, or form. But the fact of the matter is, we were already there 2-3 generations ago. Yeah, we could have been the leading nation that had a power or energy source built upon renewable energy dominant, yeah, societies, if that makes sense. Because Nkrumah them was building hydroelectricity in the 1960s, right? To what's it called? To provide energy, not just for Ghana, but for a significant portion of West Africa. Yeah, and that would have been the dominant trend had the history since then not have been. So I just believe, yeah, that what Sister Jama said is very important. That for those of us who see that vision, get on with it. Yeah, get on with it, right? And as Papa Garvey says, there is no force like success. That is why the individual does all that he can to surround himself with the evidence of it. Yeah. And so we just need to surround ourselves with the evidence of some levels of success. I've said a lot. Right. People keep falling off and coming back. So I'm going to go to and sister, when you need to go, just let me know. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say thank you for having me. So I do need to go, but I thank you so much for having me on tonight, Brother Shakara, and as always, Brother Omowale. Thank you so much for another very vibrant and educational discussion. I always learn so much in these discussions from everyone that's participating. So I thank you, and I look forward to more of these in the future.
Thank you, sis. Before you go, if you got anything coming up, yeah, that people need to know about, let them know, please.
I do have some stuff coming up, but I'm hush mouth. So, but follow me on Twitter at JamIWuyor, which is JAMAIWUYOR, for any updates on stuff. But yeah, I'm working on something to help our people move forward from miseducation and disinformation targeting our communities, and I'll be making some announcements about it soon.
Thank you very much, my sister.
Looking forward to hear that, Jam.
Yes, yes. Family, right? Giving thanks to Sister Jam. like she said, follow her on Twitter and them kind of things. Yeah, to be honest, yeah, I was looking to end the conversation or the end of the stream around now, yeah, but enough people have come through, so I want to respect you lot's time, yeah. So I'm gonna keep it going, brother Omwale. Do let me know if you have to go, yeah.
I'll probably give you 10 more minutes.
That's cool, my brother. Yeah, I know how it goes. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's 2 o'clock in the morning in the UK, but it is my channel, so I have a responsibility to host the people them. So feel free to go if you need to go, bro, and don't feel no way about it. Right? Who was? I think it was Fire. No, it was on it. Sorry, not quite yet, bro. I think on it set was before you. So let me come to on it set first.
Oh no, just enjoying the panel. You know, I didn't really have any questions. Well, maybe I wanted to ask, since you were talking about ending the Berlin Conference.
Yes.
How do you propose? I mean, you know, political integration. What are some proposals toward, like ending these colonial borders, and how do we go about with that? Like how do we, as a people? Yeah.
Thank you for that question, my brother. Firelight. I'm gone. Okay. Well, Cohen, you just got promoted, my brother. So feel free to come through.
I'm glad I get promoted. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
I just really wanted to make good night, everyone. Yeah. I just really wanted to make a statement based off of what Sister Jam was saying when she was talking about propaganda. And I really wanted to say that propaganda is not always a bad thing. In fact, I believe that propaganda sometimes can be very useful. I mean, if you see some of the organizations that been developed recently, you know, even though they're very ahistorical, they kind of use propaganda to really build their base in a huge and large way. So I really just wanted to comment on her idea of propaganda and just let her know, her and the family know that propaganda sometimes can be very useful. Understand? Yes,
King.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna come back to that, my brother. EX, go ahead, my bro.
Big up everyone. I just wanted to ask, is there like a modern kind of Pan-African pamphlet? Because a lot of people, you know, they ain't really in the know of what Pan-Africanism is. Like a lot of people, like, you know, they're more like bound to their nation. But is there like, a pamphlet or something like that?
Yes. I'm gonna come back to that question. Firelight.
Yes, brother.
Blessings.
Yes, respect to all the panel. No, just a little short question for the panel.
Ahead.
Yeah, you can hear, right?
I can hear you, bro.
Yeah. I just want to send a little question to the panel. Little short question. What do you audience think about like the education system and the curriculum? And I don't think that's a big hindrance. You don't think we should have some African freedom schools by now?
Most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, all right. So I've logged them questions here. So let's try and respond to all of them. One first was about sorry, Cohen, I've forgotten your question, you know.
My comment was just about propaganda.
Yes, propaganda. Yes. And that kind of relates to brother EX in terms of a Pan-African pamphlet. I like that. And then we've got a question about school and education. I'll kick it off. In that, first of all, I'm a Garveyite. When it comes to propaganda, the Garvey movement was very strong on propaganda. In fact, in the School of African Philosophy, Papa Garvey, as housed in the book Message to the People, has a whole chapter on propaganda. So I consider what we're doing right about now part of propaganda. In fact, funnily enough,
because Garvey even talk about propaganda as using it as good and bad. See that?
Exactly.
And we need to do that. We can't break this, or not we can't get this cycle break. Not really how these people got so much a stronghold and still learning this curriculum for all these hundreds of years. This have to change for we to get something we call the youths now, whereas in it. We gotta break that cycle. And not all of this thought matching can change. Sense of schooling that what Gary was so important because it was into printing and them things.
Yes, King.
They see the importance of educating the people with the right knowledge. And we can't break this psychology.
Yes,
You talk all over we had talk to the mountain with voice.
Yes, King. Yes, why are you laughing, Ross? Stop laughing. What's it called? Yeah. So when it comes to these things, so I totally agree. And funnily enough, before this session, I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with my brother Abiola, who was one of the people that was scheduled to be here. If he wasn't in Congo, he would be here. And he was saying exactly this point. Yeah, that he said he doesn't know if we need any more education. We need more propaganda. So we were going back and forth discussing this and debating this and the difference between education and propaganda. And because I teach like in African education institutions, I think in terms of education and programs, you know what I'm saying? But also I'm in media, so I also think in terms of propaganda. So I've been meditating on the cross section between education and propaganda and that relationship, if that makes sense, at the moment.
You have to mix them, man. You have to mix them, man.
Yeah. Definitely man. But what I will say is that on either side of that, the key component that is missing is organization and institutionalization. So we've got all of the information, the the ideology, we've got all that we need, in terms of the actual written down on paper stuff.
But not crossing
one second, Firelight. One second. We have all of it, Like look at this book, Just this one book. If we all just read this one book, we'll be like 10 steps ahead of the game, right? And actually formulated, like we have everything what we need for no. Right. It's what I'm saying. But then now taking it off the page and putting it into institutions and building programs and kind of things there is the next step. And it's easier said than done. Give thanks, bro. You don't know it, right? You know what I'm saying? You have your coffee as well. We must have it. We must have it, right? So I'm saying to you, so all I'm saying is that it's not all of these things are important. So if somebody else is gonna come and say, well, we need agriculture and we need food, and you know what I'm saying? Well, we need architecture, but all of it is about institutionalization built based upon organization. So yes, we do need all of it. We need education, we need propaganda, but more importantly,
is the farm schools to get them youths raised in this type of mentality. Because
I agree, bro.
Remember, I don't know if you know about this. Ever hear about this story about the Rasta man that went Ethiopia from Jamaica? Some Rasta brethren that went Ethiopia from Jamaica, and the king watched them there, sit down and watch them for a few days, and then the end again like fidgety and thought that the king didn't want to see them. But then when the king comes and reason to them like a few days down, the king tell them all they can tell them now, boy, go back down home in the west and organize and centralize. Nothing a big thing, just that simple thing. And if you really check how serious that there is, it's very serious. Organize and centralize, and everything else going to join and going to follow.
Yes, sir.
Shut up.
It's simple, you know.
So I didn't even know who's calling me. Yes, King.
This Cohen. Yeah, I constantly hear people saying organize. People need to be organized. Organization. Kwame Ture, Malcolm X, even you guys these days talk about organization. But my question is, what is the catalyst that can get people to organize in 2020? You see, because I asked myself.
That's what you need freedom schools.
Oh, let me finish fire. But I asked myself, what has caused Black people to come together these days and get organized? You see, when Michael Jordan come out, like when a new Michael Jordan come out, you see lines form around the block. People organize very quickly, especially Black people, to get organized to buy their tennis shoes. You see, and then let me finish, brother. When the new Cardi B album come out, people organize in a very systematic way to buy these kinds of products. So my question is, as far as pan-Africanism go, what is the catalyst that would cause people to organize under that kind of format? That's the question I have.
Go ahead, brother Amwale.
So was the question is, what is the catalyst that pushed people towards organization?
Yes, so I'm gonna because there's some background noise, I'm gonna mute everyone else's mic here, so don't feel offended. All right, bless up. Go ahead, bro.
So it was the question, what is the catalyst that pushes people towards organization? I mean, people organize to meet their needs.
Under Pan-Africanism, what is the catalyst that would cause people to organize under Pan-Africanism in 2020? That's the question I have.
I think that people have to see value in the the world order that Pan-Africanism is seeking to establish. I think that that's what Sister Jam was sharing with her closing remarks, and that there's so much misinformation out here to purposefully mislead people, but also there's so much disinformation to keep us politically blind that it doesn't allow you to arrive at certain conclusions in which you will say, oh, I need to be working towards developing some type of Pan-African organization or entity by which we attain our freedom. What I'll say is that nothing organizes the people like their conditions. You know what I mean? Like I'm a firm believer in atmospheric conditions being a great motivator for change, right? Like if it's raining outside, we seek shelter, right? So in times of great hostility, it's almost like sheep, they move in a flock. But sheep all have like this internal mechanism that when there is something surrounding the flock that is a danger, they all draw tighter to closer. They all draw closer together, right? All of the sheep in the flock move closer to the center. That makes them, a tighter body, so to speak, right? And that's an atmospheric condition. There's something in their immediate environment that's causing them to change. Now, the reason why I think it has not worked for many Black people is some way, in order to survive or make sense of the domination that we exist in or exist under on a daily basis, a lot of Black people, their survival switch has almost been like flipped off, or it's been like, hacked into. So it's like Black people do not respond in a manner that prioritizes survival. We respond in a manner that prioritizes, in psychology, they say that people are moved by pleasure or pain. So as children or childlike people, we want to move in a direction that's going to minimize the pain, reduce the harm, and allow us to experience as much pleasure. But the alternative to that is, as a self-determining people, you have to, if you want to win or you want to be liberated, it actually requires you to do the opposite. It actually requires you to forego pleasure or forego immediate gratification. It actually requires you to embrace pain, meaning like, okay, I may have to embrace sacrifice or discomfort in order to achieve the things that I want to achieve. But for some reason, I feel like that switch has been turned off in a lot of our minds. And Dr. Asante, he always says that consciousness precedes unity. So if you don't have the proper consciousness, meaning the proper outlook or lens through which to view the situation that's impacting you, most of your actions are going to be, ineffective and chaotic, anyway. So for me personally, I'm a proponent. I would much rather have a badass core, a tight core of 10 ride or die, willing to go all out individuals than to have 100 weak and just like soft and like I don't want 1,000 useless people. Like they're dead weight. I'd rather have 5 who are strong, because I think you can get so much more done with the strength and unity and single-minded purposeness of that 5 than you can get done with like having 1,000 people around who are just lost and looking for somebody to essentially take care of them. You know, that's my perspective.
Right. I do want to answer that question, but I've got a very long-winded answer, and I know Brother Omwale has to go, and he wants Brother IC3.
I'm gonna give you 3 minutes, bro. I'm cutting out at the live has almost been going for 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's at 2:27 right now.
Yeah,
so at 2:30, I'm gonna cut out.
No, I get it. So I'm gonna, because I know Brother IC3 wanted you to answer a question. So I'll get that, and then we'll allow you to depart, and then I'll answer this question back again. So go ahead, IC3. What was the question again?
Yes. The question is, could Brother Omwale, in the time he's got, expound on the switchover? Is that me echoing?
I can't hear it echo, bro.
No, okay, I remember the question.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Could he expound on the switchover between African and Black? And you mentioned it happened around about a particular time. Was that about the time of the development of? Just I'll let you say.
So I wasn't talking about between African and Black. What I was saying is that historically, our people, and I was speaking specifically about America. People in America have always had an African consciousness, meaning they understood that they were African, but they also understood that African meant Black, right? They understood that we in America were the same people as the people who were in Haiti, as the people who were in Jamaica, as the people who were in Brazil. Like, we understood that we were all the same folks. In fact, most people, when we arrived here on the slave vessels, the first port was in the Caribbean. So from the Caribbean, your brother could be sold to Haiti, your mom could be sold to the mainland in America, so that's how families are split up. In fact, you have to remember that our bodies were an asset. So if you were, someone who was down in the Bahamas and you were seen to be, it's almost like in prison right now. In prison, if you have an inmate that has too much influence in the jail and controls things, that becomes a safety hazard for the correctional officers, the people who try to enforce order in the jail. So what they'll often do is they'll take that prisoner out of that jail and send them to another facility. Well, it's the same thing on the plantation. You might have one of our ancestors who were enslaved in the Bahamas, but this dude, he's not bending. He's still showing his strength, and the people around him are starting to look at him as a leader. So what they would do to people like that, who they saw as problematic, was, I'm just going to sell this person to another plantation. And oftentimes, that plantation did not have to be in the colony that you were in, right? Because this was a global trade. So there were people who were problematic in the Bahamas, and they said, okay, we got something for you. We're going to sell you to a plantation in America. As long as they give us the dollar for you, we perfectly fine. And that's what we saw, like, historically. So there's always been that understanding that we as a people are African, right? When you look at all of our organizations, all of them had, and I'm talking about, this is the early 19th century, definitely the 18th century, they all had the name African in the title. Yep. What happens is America, towards the middle of the 19th century, is looking to make a play to shore up slavery in America. Like, they wanted this to be a slave society, right? Because Britain is already, as of 1808, saying that they're going to abolish, slavery in all of their colonies because of, the insurrection that happened in Haiti, right? They're looking like, okay, this slavery thing is bad for business, and you have places that are starting to industrialize, so we need to do away with this. America didn't want to take that position. So in order to protect slavery, America from 1838 to 1850 enacted, or actually to 1854, enacted a series of laws to restrict the movement of free Black people, and to pretty much state that to be Black in this country, or to be African in this country, means to be a slave. Right, so they founded what was referred to as the American Colonization Society, and the goal of this society was to immigrate the free black population either to land that had not yet been developed in America. Like, okay, we're going to send them out to Oklahoma somewhere, or send them to South America, or send them back to Africa. Either way, get them out of the slave states and get them out of what's American territory. Because as long as they're here, they serve as a threat to slavery, because you got all these black people running away, right? And these people are assisting. So the way that free black people responded to this change in environment, some of them, like Martin Delany, were pushing for immigration. Others, like Frederick Douglass, they started to change their perspective on being African, right? Douglass, he writes an essay, a speech. His final speech is written in 1894. It's not his final speech. The speech is called Lessons of the Hour. In this speech, he says, "What have I to do with Africa?" He says, I don't owe any more to the Negroes in Africa than I do to the Negroes in America. He says, in fact, I'm not even purely African. Because of slavery over these past 200 years, I've inherited Caucasian blood. So where are the people of this admixture to go? I'm not African, I'm American, right? This is Frederick Douglass making a proto, ADOS argument in the 19th century. Yeah. So you get this situation where, because, America is looking to make the law of the land, to be black means to be a slave, or to be African means to be a slave. You get free black people looking to disassociate themselves with what it means to be African, because they desire to stay connected to America. So that's where you kind of like got the split in our history, and you see it playing out to this day. To this day, like, black people are like, man, like, I ain't no African. I'm from Crenshaw, Compton. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy.
Brother Mali, I know you gotta go, so we'll let you go. I mean, sorry, Brother M.A. Brown did want you to have a crack at this question here if you do have a moment, but please don't feel obliged, Carl. I know you got things to do.
What's the question?
It says, how do we best deal with the implications of conflicting discourse around geographical boundaries of the African continent?
The geographical, Marcus Garvey said, I know no boundaries when it comes to African people. I know no borders when it comes to African people. So geographical borders on the African continent are illegitimate. They serve as almost a virtual prison cell for many of our people who are imprisoned and ruled over by a small group of black elite. Or a small group of overseers and managers of the plantation who eat very well because they serve foreign interests, and they keep their people impoverished. So these are the traders among us that we have to, deal with the way that all mature people deal with their traders. But I think in terms of overcoming that, I think that there has to be a massive grassroots movement on the African continent that has the proper orientation. Without an orientation that has race consciousness as its foundation, it's never going to be able to address the issue that we're faced with. And I think the challenge has been a lot of our people who exist in majority black populations, it becomes very difficult to develop or cultivate a race conscious, because it's like, hey, the people who are oppressing me are black. So this is a class thing. But my argument would be that's actually a false reading of the way that race operates on a macro and or a global level. And until more of our people have that understanding of how race operates, we won't be able to, attain that victory that we are looking for. So, what we're looking for is the spreading of Afrocentric or African-centered consciousness at the grassroots amongst our young people, because I think that from that consciousness or from that vantage point, we'll be able to start to develop better solutions that will help us get to the goal that we're looking to attain.
Brother Omowale, please let the people them know what you have going on.
Peace. Yeah, so I'm as always, you could definitely keep up with me. I'm on Twitter at Omowale Africa. That's Africa spelled with a K. But I'm working on a documentary at the moment. My hope is that I'll be releasing this documentary by the end of October. It's called The Un-American Dilemma. Once we get it done, I'm going to schedule a virtual screening and have a forum or panel right after the first showing where we discuss the documentary. Then after that, I'm moving right into writing a book that I'm looking to release in the spring of 2021. So I'm really, really busy, but always looking to connect with like-minded Africans, no matter where you are in the world.
Brother Omale, before you go, I just want to give you a joke. Read the comment on the screen.
On the screen?
Yeah.
Pan-Africanism is dead. Foundational Black Americans murdered it, I guess.
Peace out, bro. Peace out. Peace out. Peace out.
There you go, bro.
Yeah, bless like yourself. Bless like yourself. All right, I'm gonna try and answer a few questions at once. And I'm gonna do it in a bit of a long-winded way, but I hope it addresses a number of the questions on the table right about now. By the way, I do want to say though, in relation to that last comment, like it's interesting to me that the brethren feels proud. Like pan-Africanism is dead, and Black Americans killed it, and this is like a celebratory statement. It's beautiful. It's madness. That level of cognitive dissonance is very interesting to me. Right, I'm gonna share my screen, and I haven't forgotten your question, brother EX, about the pamphlet, right? So we're gonna get to the pamphlet business in a second, all right, so bear with me while I go through this, okay, and maybe we might be able to wrap up after this as well. All right, so we're gonna return to the blueprint for Black Power, and in the book, forgive me for not having the page numbers here, but sorry, I'm gonna what's going on here? Right, my computer does this thing whereby it goes into a madness. Hold on. All right, okay, here we go. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Because my
yeah,
I've got a bit of an issue with my. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing screen and wheel and come again. So excuse me while I wheel and come again. Right. Yeah, technical hitches, kings and queens. Bear with me, and we'll get it back to you shortly. Yeah. So in the book Blueprint for Black Power, there's a chapter called something and the economics of Afrocentrism. Let me get the right chapter title. So I'm on point, family. The Black consumer, and the economics of Afrocentrism, and it's a very interesting chapter, all right, and hopefully going through that very quickly with a bit of analysis may help to answer some of the questions that are on the table right about now, as well as some others. Lord have mercy. Why now? Okay, here we go. We're getting there, family. Hold tight. Close that down. Right, here we go. So thank you very much. Brother EX, thank you very much. And hopefully you can wrap up after this, Okay. So in the chapter, he's making an appraisal of the successes and the failures of the African-centered Black nationalist Pan-Africanist movement. I'll let it speak for itself and give some analysis whilst I'm reading. He says, where there have been notable attempts to address the material or economic deprivation of Blacks and the powerlessness these conditions breed, the bulk of the attention and energy of Black nationalists have been focused on the rectification of falsifications of African history and culture. Efforts in this regard on the part of many prominent past and contemporary Black nationalists have been referred to as cultural nationalism, in contrast to what we might refer to as Black economic nationalism. The reader should keep in mind that these nationalisms are not by any means mutually exclusive, but are merely a matter of emphasis, having important consequences nevertheless. Yeah, right. Okay, cultural nationalists seek to restore in African peoples a knowledge and practice of their history and culture, mainly through education and the use of various cultural art forms. They generally believe the cultural revolution must necessarily precede or is a form of political revolution and presumably economic revolution. The impact of resuscitated African and Black American history and culture has been remarkably significant in culturally revolutionizing the mind, consciousness and behavior of many in the Black community today. The growing acceptance of the ideology of Afrocentricity, Black Africana studies, the growing enactment of African-centered socialization practices such as rites of passage or like African themed marriage ceremonies and kind of things there. The increased consumption of African-styled items, the tremendous expanded trade and readership in African-centered books and literature brilliantly attests to the effectiveness of cultural nationalism in reorientating or reconfiguring the consciousness and cultural attitudes of many in the African nation and international communities. Yeah, now, very important. So there's a Black books movement, there's an African fashion movement, there's a natural hair movement, yeah? And to a significant degree, all of these movements have been facilitated or developed and forwarded by people that we would refer to as Pan-Africanists, Black nationalists, in the movement, yeah? Enough of these things are made into fashion trends. Like African fashion is a very big thing right about now, so is natural hair. But really and truly, yeah, to a significant degree, the people that forwarded this agenda before it was fashionable were people that had a Black or African-centered consciousness, yes? And so oftentimes the mainstream comes and reaps the rewards or the benefits of this work, this groundwork that has been done by people that affirmed these expressions as a political with political intentions. Yeah, however, the relatively remarkable success of cultural nationalism simultaneously highlights its crucial success, failings, and vulnerabilities. The cultural success of cultural nationalism has not been paralleled by Black social, economic, and political success. While the cultural indoctrination of Black America moved apace, the social disorganization and deterioration of the Black urban community easily outpaced it. And we can make the same judgment for Black people in Britain or anywhere else in the world. In the face of this and other indicators, we must conclude that cultural nationalism and Black nationalism in general have not been able to convert Black cultural sentiment, African cultural sentiment, history, culture, and cultural and pride, into tangible Black power. In this instance, it has reached essentially the same impasse as that reached by the assimilation and Black Negro conservatism. They have all been unwilling and unable to convert their ideological achievements into pragmatic, tangible, bankable, economic imperatives for Africans. Yeah. Okay. So where am I going with this? Yeah. There are some successes, but there are some failures. The difference between the successes of the Black nationalist Pan-Africanists and the successes and the failures of the Black nationalist Pan-Africanists and the successes and failures of the Black assimilationist and neoconservatives, yeah, as he refers to them here, yeah, is that at least on the part of the Black assimilationist and neoconservative, they are able to present at least the illusion of success. Yeah, Black millionaires. Yeah, black presidents, prime ministers, and politicians of every description. Okay, basically black folks in high places. Yeah,
Shakara,
yes, sir.
Shakara, I'd just like to emphasize the point that you just read, what you just read there, the word
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Point taken. Yeah. So what I'm saying here, yeah, is that there's oftentimes, yes, I was coming to this question about the organization, yeah, and the catalyst, yeah, for getting people involved in Pan-African organization. The reality is that what makes other options, yeah, and what Brother Amos Wilson calls other orientation, yes, as in other than African orientation, look sexy, is because there are resources and propaganda involved in presenting this as the only viable option for forward movement, for development, and you've got examples in front of you that look like forward movement and development. Yeah, they're better able to present these ideas than we are at this current moment in time. But we can still demonstrate the fact that we have had influence and impact. Yeah, so we need to, first of all, it starts with being able to understand that where exactly we have had influence and impact. And then when we coming back to this word bankable, I think the major catalyst comes back to what Sister Jam was saying earlier, is maximizing the potential, the power potential based upon our current constitution. Yes, so at the moment, there may well be, and understandably, a concern with getting the masses on code, getting the masses on program. Yeah, whereas the catalyst may well be in demonstrating the viability of the program itself on whatever level that we are able to write about now. For example, as Firelight was saying earlier, the development of African-centered education. If we worked on that agenda and was able to demonstrate viable results in that agenda, then we would have something to propagate. Yeah. So coming back to this pamphlet idea, maybe, yeah, we do need I don't know if we need a pamphlet. We need, because things are a bit more complex than that to some degree. I do think though that we do need things that would break down things more simply, and people are doing that, like with things like YouTube channels, yeah, things like PLO Lumumba speeches, or Dr. Mumbi, yeah, breaking down things in simplistic terms, yeah, using everyday issues, yeah. I think that work needs to be done and is being done, but needs to be done even more. But I'm saying that just beyond just promoting analysis and breakdowns of society, macro and micro, having something to propagate means that we have a success that we can use. Yes, sir.
So see, like, the reason why I'm saying a pamphlet, right? Because then it'll be one reference where it's agreed upon. Because like when we have like YouTube or whatever, it becomes people's opinions and people's interpretation. Do you see what I'm saying? And also, like what you we're saying, right, and what Brother Omawali was saying about the 10 at the beginning, there's always going to be the innovators, the people that are going to move forward. The masses are really going to be the people that follow those people, and they just need the instructions. Here's your 10 commandments, for lack of a better term.
I agree. Like the 10-point program of the Black Panthers and them kind of things there was very, very effective. I don't have no problem with what you're saying there. I don't know if a pamphlet is the most up-to-date way of disseminating that.
Yeah,
right. Just I'm saying, right. So that's why I was saying it in terms of being able to break it down using multimedia. Yeah, I agree with that completely. But I'm saying even beyond that, yeah, and this is what Amos Watson teaches, that in the book Garveyism versus the New World Order, he speaks about the difference between the pseudo-nationalists and the real authentic nationalists. And it's about demonstrating results. It's about demonstrating the viability of the program that you say you have. And so I think that, for example, using that example of education, this is a definitive arena in which we have we have the opportunity to present a viable example of the fruits, yes, of what it is that we say we stand for. You know what I'm saying? By building institutions that are producing powerful children and powerful young people. You understand what I mean? Yeah. And so from there, we're able to propagate the results of these institutions in the children that they're producing. Does that make sense?
Excuse me,
Yeah. So I would define it as a catalyst. Sorry, my brother Michael, Kwesi Fisher. I think you'll be our last guest for the evening or the night, guys. 2:30 in the morning.
Okay. If I can interject on that, this is a problem that we've had a long time ago already. I'm a little older, so about 25 years ago, we had organized all kinds of things on a Pan-African basis, but we didn't have a pot to piss in. So we had to figure out what we do because the people follow those who feed them. So one of the things that we did is, there have been a number of Pan-Africanists that have been very successful business-wise, and particularly in the entertainment business. There's a brother who died, unfortunately, named Dick Griffey, who built a whole entertainment empire, Solar Records, among other things, and then began developing trade relations with Africa, African countries. And that was a big trend, and he was a multimillionaire, and there's others in the entertainment business that are Pan-Africanists, among them myself. So one of the things that we did is we built up, Dick Griffey said, for example, that African culture, black music, black culture, is to black people what oil is to the Arabs, only we don't control it. It's an incredible resource, billions of dollars.
Yes, sir.
And we've had white folks manage that and send their children to school and use that money to build up investment banks and everything else.
Yes, sir.
So one of our jobs was to go into that industry, and there are quite a few Pan-Africanists in the industry who are successful, who just don't talk about the Pan-Africanism as much. One of the Pan-Africanist projects that we started was, of course, you've heard of Public Enemy, obviously. And Public Enemy was furthered and managed by Pan-Africanists. The money that came in was used to further things. In fact, y'all talked about Brazil earlier, that there's a spark of consciousness in Brazil that also happened because Public Enemy went to Brazil in 1990 and sparked political hip hop. So there are some things that we can point to, but I think it is very important that we move beyond just education, that we move beyond analysis and beyond propaganda, but move into the business and economics aspects so that we can actually demonstrate that Pan-Africanism is a viable thing, that we have trade relations with our brothers and sisters in Tanzania, in South Africa, in Ghana, in Kenya, and we have to overcome a lot of these neo-colonial bureaucrats. But it's very important that we practice that in the UK as well. We did a lot of business with the brothers and sisters in the UK.
Yes, sir.
So insofar, I read Amos Wilson's book, and it's a great book, but I believe it's a little lacking of practical knowledge when it comes to the economics of Pan-Africanism. And I think we really have to develop the economics of Pan-Africanism above all. Excuse me. Otherwise, our people won't take us serious because they want to eat.
No, most definitely, my brother. Which is you kind of making my point in terms of being able to demonstrate bankable success, and there is a lot of good work going on in the world. I think that the point I was making is that where it is happening, we need to do a better job of presenting the fact that it is happening and making our people aware of the results that are being produced. Yeah, it's
right. You're absolutely right about that.
It's not that nothing is going on. Yeah. Is that our people are not aware of what is going on, right?
I mean, look at the ADOS people, for example. Neither Yvette Carnell nor Antonia Moore have a pot to piss in. But our people are so desperate that they say, "Oh my God, these people are maybe be bringing us a check," so they flock to them.
Well,
they don't flock to them,
And which is the point I was going to make, because in effect, right, not having the pot, so to speak, here is a part of their narrative. That's a part of their narrative. It's a part of the selling of the ideology. However, we need to be very aware of the fact that Brother Omar said earlier that the anti-African ideologies are subsidized. Yes, in other words, right, the difference between us and the assimilationists and the neoconservative is that they are organized within the context of the society at large, because assimilation is their goal. So in as much as the system sees viability in their ideology, they will give it energy, they will give it steam, and it will present as though there are more gains and benefits in that line of action and reasoning than ours, because the society has the wherewithal to present it as more viable. Doesn't make it.
That's true.
It doesn't mean that the conditions of the masses of our people are going to be any different, but they have better resources, right, to present an idea and a narrative. So we have to bear that in mind also, and not always be so defeatist in that regard. Just understand where we are at the moment, yeah, and understand that these people, those among us who have the assimilationist tendency, yeah, to whatever degree, are going to present as more effective because they align with the dominant oppressive ideology. That's it. Yeah, we just have to accept that and charge it to the game and get on with the work. Yeah, and having said that, I did want to big up the fact of that Miss Roots here, online education sessions here, is in the place. Yeah, so check that out if you're in the UK looking for online education for your children in particular. You know what I'm saying? There's brother Marcus Klein over there in Chicago doing magnificent things here with the Freedom Home Academy. There's sister Queen Thais down there in Atlanta. You've got the Al-Qiblan Academy of Excellence in the UK, the Ma'at Academy of Excellence, and a number of other different Saturday schools. Yeah, and you know what I'm saying. So there's work going on. Then now, at some point, I'm going to bring on my brothers and my sisters who are in Sierra Leone of the Black Star National, Network, Black Star African National Network International. Yeah. African Network International, Basani, all right, who are doing fantastic work in agriculture and even waste disposal, over there.
Shaka, there's an echo, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why that is.
I think it's Afrika.
No, it won't be me.
All right, I'll mute everybody apart from me for now, yeah? Yeah, so I'm just saying that is a part of the program, demonstrating the active work that is taking place and making more people aware of that, rather than just the lamentations of, you know, our condition and them kind of things there. I shouldn't say rather than, as well as, because we have to make sure people are aware of what's going on, but present at the same time the work that is being done to alleviate the condition. Family, it's like it's 2:45 in the morning over here, yeah. And we have things to do our morning. So I do wanna I can't even see that. All right, so you're because you're in Europe, innit? So yeah. You don't know. I get you, bro. I get you. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up here. Especially because we don't want the video to be too long, because we want people to watch it. But I want to say thank you to everyone, yeah, who has joined me for this particular show. There's more to come. We're never going to get through everything in one show. We could have gone more into different things like the borders and the resources and the economic viability of pan-africanism over this neocolonialism structure that we have at the moment. The viability of a global African network based upon that fact and them kind of things there. The micro examples of politics wherever we are as African people, and how having global African identity and political organization assists us in achieving and securing rights in the nations that we're in. Do you know what I'm saying? We could have gone into all kinds of different things. Well, we're never going to exhaust all the subjects in one conversation, but I do hope that ones and ones have gotten something from this conversation as it has taken place. Special thank you to Brother Omawale, Afrika, spelled with a K, and Sister Jam Iwuyo for their contribution to this conversation also. And I guarantee you that in future we'll get Brother Abiola back to make a contribution. I want to get my Auntie Affiong over there in Nigeria on as well, so stay tuned for that, and we'll make it all happen. My brothers who are left on the panel, thank you also for your contributions. Yeah, and Brother Michael Fisher, I feel like you've got a lot of experience, so do subscribe, because I'd love to hear more from you and your experiences in the movement on a future show. Yeah. I look forward to that. I look forward to that. Family, stay tuned to Shaka Ross Beats. Like out the video, share it far and wide. I am working on some stuff, so I don't want to talk about it right about now in terms of things that I'm going to be broadcasting, but do stay tuned. And always remember to Namwadi, giving thanks to the Mother Father, creator of the universe. Because I, Muzima Mokudo, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, African power for all African